The Arizona Territory didn't forgive mistakes. Elara learned that truth when she was 9 years old, watching her father's wagon overturn on a switchback trail, his body tumbling into a canyon that swallowed Scream's whole. She learned it again at 16 when a flash flood took her mother and left Elara clinging to a cottonwood branch for 11 hours, her fingernails torn and bloody. And she learned it a third time 6 months ago when her brother, Thomas, died with a bullet in his spine and a map clutched in his fist, a map that now lived inside her corset, pressed against ribs that ached with every breath. The trading post squatted at the edge of Redemption Flats like a wounded animal, its adobe walls the color of old bone, its roof patched with rusted tin that sang in the wind. Elara stood in the shadow of its eastern wall, her dark hair tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her dress dusty enough to suggest weeks on the trail. She'd learned to make herself unremarkable, a skill that had kept her alive longer than beauty or charm ever could. But remarkable was the last thing she felt now. Through a gap in the boards, she watched the three riders. They'd arrived an hour after she had, which meant they were tracking her or tracking rumors of her. The territory was lousy with rumors lately. Whispers about Thomas Voss and his obsession with the widow's vein. Stories about a map that showed the way to a gold deposit so rich it could buy a man a kingdom or dig him a grave, depending on his luck and his conscience. Elara had neither luck nor conscience to spare. What she had was desperation. A Navy Colt revolver with 4 rounds left, and the certain knowledge that those 3 men would kill her the moment they confirmed what she carried. The leader sat astride a roan gelding, his face hidden beneath a hat brim stained with sweat and dust. His hands rested easy on the saddle horn, but his posture carried the coiled tension of a rattlesnake in shade. The other 2 flanked him, one broad-shouldered and stupid-looking, the other lean and ferrety, his eyes never still. They were hired muscle. Elara had seen their type before. Men who'd do murder for $20 and a bottle of whiskey. Men who'd gut their own mothers if the price was right. But hired muscle meant someone else was pulling the strings, someone who knew enough about the map to send dogs sniffing after it. She needed to move. Staying here was suicide. Elara eased away from the wall and slipped through the back door of the trading post. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of tobacco, leather, and unwashed bodies. A handful of men occupied the space, drovers nursing warm beer, a priest reading from a worn Bible in the corner, a card game in progress near the front window. None of them looked up as she entered. The proprietor, a barrel-chested man named Hoskins with a beard like steel wool, stood behind the counter cleaning a glass that would never be clean. His eyes flicked to Elara, then to the front window where the 3 riders were visible, then back to Elara. "You've got a problem," Hoskins said quietly. "I've got several." "Those boys outside are asking questions, asking about a woman traveling alone, asking about maps and gold and the Voss family." He set the glass down. "I didn't tell them nothing, but I'm not in the business of making enemies for strangers." Elara approached the counter, keeping her voice low. "I need a guide, someone who knows the Superstition Mountains." Hoskins barked a laugh that held no humor. "Lady, the superstitions eat people. Even the Apache won't go into the deep canyons. You want a guide for that, you're asking for someone crazy or desperate." "Perfect. I'll take both. There's only one man fits that description, and he's not for hire." Hoskins jerked his chin toward the back corner of the room where a figure sat alone, half hidden in shadow. "Ronan Hale. Best tracker in the territory. Also the meanest son of a bitch you'll ever meet. He doesn't take jobs anymore, especially not ones that involve gold or mountains or foolish women." Elara studied the figure in the corner. What she could see suggested a man in his middle 30s, lean and weathered, with dark hair that touched his collar and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same stone as the desert. He sat utterly still, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table before him, his eyes fixed on something invisible in the middle distance. What happened to him? "Nothing you need to know about. Take my advice. Find someone else." But there was no one else. Elara could feel time collapsing around her like a tunnel cave-in. Those riders outside wouldn't wait forever. More would come. And when they did, they'd take the map and put a bullet in her brain, and Thomas would have died for nothing. She crossed the room before she could talk herself out of it. Ronan Hale didn't look up as she approached. His hands rested flat on the table, calloused and scarred. The hands of a man who'd worked hard and lived harder. A gun belt hung from the back of his chair, the holster worn smooth from use. Up close, Elara could see the gray threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of too many seasons squinting into hostile sun. "Mr. Hale?" she said. Nothing. No acknowledgement at all. "I need a guide." Still nothing. "I can pay." Not interested. His voice was gravel and smoke, barely above a whisper. Elara pulled out the chair across from him and sat without invitation. That got his attention. His eyes lifted slowly, and for the first time she saw their color, pale gray, like winter sky before snow. Cold eyes. Dangerous eyes. "You've got about 3 seconds to stand up and walk away," Ronan said. "Those men outside want to kill me." "Not my problem." "They're after a map to the Widow's Vein mine." Something flickered in those gray eyes. Recognition, maybe, or memory. But it passed quickly, replaced by stone-cold indifference. "Then you're already dead. Just don't know it yet." Elara leaned forward. "My brother found something. Information about the mine that no one else has. He died for it, and I'm not going to let these vultures pick his bones clean." "Your brother was a fool." "My brother was a dreamer." Same thing in this country. Ronan finally reached for his whiskey and took a slow sip. The Widow's Vein is a fairy tale. A story drunk prospectors tell each other to stay warm at night. There's no mine. There's no gold. There's just rocks and rattlesnakes and a whole lot of corpses that thought they were smarter than everyone else. I'm not asking you to believe in it. I'm asking you to take me into the mountains. No. $500. No. 1,000. Ronan's jaw tightened. You could offer me 10,000 and I'd still say no. I don't do that kind of work anymore. What kind of work? Helping people? Leading fools to their deaths. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. Find someone else. But Elara was faster. She reached out and grabbed his wrist, a stupid move she realized immediately, as his other hand dropped to the knife at his belt. They froze like that, her fingers wrapped around his scarred wrist, his hand poised over the blade. "Please!" The word came out harder than she intended, stripped of any softness or pleading. "I have nowhere else to go, and those men out there won't stop with me. They'll chase rumors of this map across the whole territory. How many more will die before this is finished?" For a long moment, Ronan said nothing. Then he pulled his wrist free with casual strength and stepped back. "You really think you can find it? The mine?" "I think my brother died believing in it. That's enough. Belief doesn't mean shit in the superstitions." "Then what does?" "Luck, and I don't have any to spare." But he didn't walk away. Instead, he studied her with those winter sky eyes, assessing, calculating. "Let me see the map." "Not here." "Then we've got nothing to discuss." Elara glanced toward the front window. The 3 riders were still there, still waiting. She made a decision. "There's a stable behind this building. Meet me there in 5 minutes. Come alone, or don't come at all." She stood and walked toward the back door without waiting for his answer. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, but she kept her pace measured, her expression neutral. Only when she stepped into the harsh afternoon sunlight did she allow herself a shaking breath. The stable was barely worthy of the name. 4 walls and a roof sheltering 3 horses and a donkey that looked older than sin. Elara positioned herself where she could watch both entrances, her hand resting on the revolver hidden beneath her coat. The seconds crawled past like wounded animals. Then the back door opened and Ronan Hale stepped through. He moved with the economy of a predator, each step deliberate, his eyes scanning the space before settling on Elara. In the stronger light, she could see more details, the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, the faded tattoo on his forearm that might have been military, the way his gun hand stayed loose and ready. "Show me," he said. Elara reached into her coat and withdrew the map. It was wrapped in oilcloth, protected from the elements that had already tried to destroy it. She unfolded it carefully on a hay bale between them. The parchment was old, brittle at the edges, marked with ink that had faded to brown. Someone had drawn the map with a careful hand. Topographical features, landmarks, elevation markers. But what made it valuable were the annotations in the margins, written in Thomas's cramped handwriting. Coordinates, water sources, geological observations that suggested the presence of gold-bearing quartz deposits. Ronan leaned closer, his expression unreadable. His finger traced one of the routes marked on the map. This is accurate? My brother surveyed it himself over 2 years. He hired geologists, consulted with miners, cross-referenced every historical account he could find. And it got him killed. It got him close enough that someone decided he was a threat. Ronan was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving across the map with the intensity of a man reading scripture. Then he straightened and crossed his arms. This route goes through Dead Horse Canyon. You know what happened there? No. 23 men went in looking for gold in '77. None came out. The Apache found what was left of them 3 weeks later. Most had died of thirst. The rest killed each other. We'll have water. You'll have heat stroke, dehydration, and probably a bullet in your back from whoever you hire to help carry supplies. This isn't a Sunday ride, Miss Voss. This is the kind of country that tests men's souls and finds them wanting. Elara met his eyes without flinching. My soul's already been tested. I'm still standing. For now. Will you help me or not? Ronan stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he refolded the map with surprising gentleness and handed it back. $2,000. Half now, half when we return. I told you I'd pay $1,000. That was before I saw where we're going. The price is $2,000, and you'll need at least 5 more people. Good people who can shoot, ride, and keep their mouths shut. I'll find them. You'll pay them. And if anyone asks, this is a survey expedition for a mining company considering land purchase in the region. No one mentions the widow's vein, no one mentions gold. We're surveying and nothing more. And if those men outside follow us? They won't. Ronan's voice dropped to something dark and certain. Because tonight, before we leave, I'm going to have a conversation with them about finding employment elsewhere. By tomorrow morning, they'll be halfway to Mexico or dead. I don't much care which. Elara felt something cold slide down her spine. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Ronan Hale wasn't just dangerous. He was the kind of dangerous that solved problems permanently. When do we leave? Tomorrow before dawn. Pack light. No dresses, no perfume, nothing that marks you as female unless you want every desperate man in camp thinking you're available. Cut your hair if you have to. Out there, you're not a woman. You're a crew member, and crew members pull their weight or they don't come back. I can handle myself. We'll see. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. That map shows maybe half the route. Where's the rest? Elara's hand moved instinctively to her chest, where the second piece of the map was sewn into the lining of her corset. You don't need to know that yet. Ronan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. So you're not just desperate, you're smart. Good. Stupid people die faster, and I've buried enough of them. He tipped his hat. Tomorrow, Miss Voss. Don't be late. Then he was gone, leaving Elara alone with the horses and the weight of what she'd just set in motion. That night, Elara didn't sleep. She'd taken a room above the trading post, a narrow space with a cot, a wash basin, and a window that overlooked the street. She sat in the darkness, watching the town slowly empty as decent people went home and the less decent emerged like insects from rotting wood. Around midnight, she heard the gunshots. 3 sharp cracks that echoed across the desert silence, followed by the thunder of horses leaving fast. Elara moved to the window and looked down. The street was empty except for a single figure standing in the center of the dusty thoroughfare, smoke still rising from the barrel of his revolver. Ronan Hale holstered his gun with the casual grace of a man who'd done it 1,000 times, then walked toward the saloon without looking back. The 3 riders who'd been hunting Elara were gone. She didn't know if they were dead or just scared, but either way, Ronan had kept his word. Elara turned from the window and began to pack. Dawn broke like a wound across the eastern sky, all red and violent and bleeding into gold. Elara stood outside the livery with her belongings reduced to a single canvas pack and a bedroll. She'd cut her hair short, traded her dress for trail clothes purchased from Hoskins, and strapped her revolver where she could reach it quickly. Ronan arrived leading 6 horses and 4 people who looked like they'd crawled out of the desert's worst nightmares. The first was a Mexican man in his 40s named Diego, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that held the kind of sadness that comes from surviving things that should have killed you. He nodded to Elara, but said nothing. The second was a woman. That surprised Elara, tall and angular with her blonde hair braided tight against her skull. She wore men's clothes and carried a Winchester rifle like it was part of her body. Cora Mackey, she said by way of introduction. I shoot better than most men and cook worse than all of them. We understand each other. Understood, Elara said. The third was a young man barely out of his teens, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. Billy Sutton, he said, offering his hand. Mr. Hale says you're paying good money for this survey work. That's right. Well, I've worked cattle drives and mining camps. I'm no stranger to hard country. The fourth was the most unsettling. A Comanche man named Two Wolves, who moved with the silence of smoke and regarded Elara with eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone to whatever lived underneath. He didn't speak at all, just gave her a single nod before moving to check his horse. Ronan swung into his saddle and looked down at the assembled group. We ride hard for 3 days to reach the foothills. From there, it's another week into the mountains. No fires after dark, no loud voices, no stupid questions. If you can't keep up, you stay behind. If you endanger the group, I'll leave you for the buzzards. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Good. Mount up. They left Redemption Flats as the sun cleared the horizon. 6 riders and a string of pack horses heading toward mountains that looked like broken teeth against the morning sky. Behind them, the town slowly woke to another day of dust and disappointment. Ahead lay territory so hostile that even the Apache spoke of it with reverence and fear. Elara didn't look back. The first 2 days passed in a haze of heat and monotony. They followed old game trails and dried creek beds, avoiding the main roads where bandits and desperate men waited for easy prey. Ronan set a punishing pace, stopping only to water the horses and eat cold meals from their packs. No one complained. These were people accustomed to hardship, to hunger and thirst, and the ache of muscles pushed past endurance. Even young Billy kept his mouth shut and his eyes open, learning quickly that the desert rewarded silence and punished carelessness. Elara rode near the middle of the group, flanked by Diego and Cora. The Mexican man was friendly in a quiet way, occasionally pointing out landmarks or signs of wildlife. Cora was less warm but not hostile. She treated Elara with the same professional distance she showed everyone else. It was Two Wolves who unsettled her most. The Comanche rode at the rear, always scanning the horizon, his weathered face revealing nothing. Twice, she caught him watching her with those penetrating eyes, and both times she had the uncomfortable sensation that he knew exactly what she carried and why. On the second night, as they made camp in a shallow arroyo sheltered from the wind, Ronan approached her. "You're doing better than I expected," he said, crouching beside the small fire Diego had built. "Most women would have quit by now. I'm not most women. Notice that?" He poured coffee from a battered pot and handed her a tin cup. "But you're holding something back. We're 2 days out and you still haven't shown me the full map." "I showed you what you need to know. What I need to know is whether you're leading us to gold or to our graves." Elara sipped the bitter coffee, buying time to choose her words. "My brother spent 2 years preparing for this. He knew the risks. He also knew that anyone who possessed the complete route would become a target. That's why he split the map in 2. The first half shows the approach and the general region. The second half shows the exact location of the mine entrance and the route through the canyon system. And you have both pieces." "Yes." "Why should I trust that you'll reveal the second piece when the time comes?" "Because if I don't, you'll leave me in the desert to die, and I have no interest in dying." Ronan studied her over the rim of his cup. "Your brother, how did he really die?" The question landed like a fist to the gut. Elara looked away, focusing on the flames instead of the memories. "He was shot, in the back, by someone he trusted." "Who?" "His partner, a man named Garrett, who'd been working with him for 6 months. Thomas thought they were friends. Turned out Garrett was being paid by someone else to steal the map and eliminate loose ends." "But he didn't get the map." "No, Thomas gave it to me before he died. Told me to finish what he started. Her voice hardened. Told me not to trust anyone. Smart advice. So why did I hire you? Because smart and desperate aren't the same thing. You need me more than you need caution. Ronan stood, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. Get some sleep. Tomorrow gets harder. He wasn't wrong. Day 3 brought them to the edge of the Badlands, where the terrain shifted from scrub desert to broken rock formations that rose like monuments to some ancient, angry god. The temperature climbed past comfortable and into punishing, the sun beating down with physical weight. Billy started to lag. Ronan noticed immediately. He dropped back to ride beside the young man, his voice low but carrying. You hurting? Just tired, Mr. Hale. Tired gets you killed. You feel like you're going to fall off that horse, you tell me. Understand? Yes, sir. But an hour later, Billy swayed in his saddle and would have fallen if Diego hadn't caught him. They stopped in the shade of a rock overhang while Cora forced water down Billy's throat and poured more over his head. Heat stroke, she diagnosed. He'll recover if we're careful, but he needs rest. Ronan's jaw tightened. We can't stop. We stop or he dies. Then he dies. The words came out flat, emotionless. We knew the risks. Jesus Christ, Ronan, Cora started, but 2 wolves cut her off with a raised hand. The Comanche had dismounted and stood facing east, his body tense. Everyone fell silent. Then Elara heard it too, the distant sound of horses moving fast. Company, 2 wolves said quietly. 6 riders. Maybe more. Ronan cursed under his breath and moved to higher ground, pulling a brass telescope from his saddlebag. He glassed the horizon for 30 seconds, then lowered the scope. They're tracking us, professional trackers from the look of it. The men from town? Elara asked. No, these are different. Better equipped. Better organized. He looked at her. Someone really wants that map. Diego checked his rifle. We can fight. Not in open ground with 1 man down. We need cover. Ronan scanned the landscape, then pointed toward a narrow canyon to the north. There. We hole up and make them come to us on our terms. They moved fast, Diego and Cora supporting Billy between them while the others led the horses. The canyon was barely wide enough for 2 people to ride abreast, its walls rising 30 feet on either side. Ronan positioned them in a defensible spot where the canyon bent sharply, giving them a killing field with no cover for attackers. Then they waited. The sun crawled across the sky like a dying thing. Sweat ran down Elara's spine, pooling at the small of her back. She checked her revolver for the 100th time, 4 rounds, same as before. Not enough for a prolonged fight. 2 wolves materialized beside her, silent as smoke. You afraid? Yes. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Overconfidence kills. He pulled a knife from his belt, its blade worn but sharp. You know how to use this? I've gutted fish. Men aren't so different, just louder. He pressed the knife into her hand. If they get close enough that you need this, aim for the throat or the belly. Anywhere else, and they'll kill you before they die. Before Elara could respond, Ronan's voice cut through the tension. Here they come. 6 riders entered the canyon at a trot, spreading out as much as the narrow space allowed. They were hard men, weathered and armed, led by someone in a black duster whose face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. They moved with the confidence of professionals who'd done this before. Ronan stepped into view, his hands loose at his sides. That's far enough. The riders stopped. The man in the black duster nudged his horse forward 2 steps. When he spoke, his voice carried the polish of education wrapped around something cold and calculating. Mr. Hale, your reputation precedes you. Wish I could say the same. My name is Samuel Cross. I represent certain business interests in San Francisco who have taken an interest in survey rights for this region. We're prepared to offer you $5,000 to turn over your maps and head back to civilization. Not interested. Then we have a problem. No. Ronan's hand drifted toward his gun. You have a problem. There's 6 of you and 6 of us. These walls make poor cover. Maybe 3 of you live long enough to ride out. The question is whether you're one of them. Cross smiled. You're assuming we came here to negotiate. It happened fast. One of Cross's men went for his gun. Ronan drew and fired in a single fluid motion, the shot punching through the man's shoulder and spinning him from his saddle. Then the canyon erupted into chaos. Diego and Cora fired from cover, their shots echoing like thunder between the stone walls. Two wolves moved like a ghost, his knife flashing as he pulled one attacker from his horse. Billy, despite his weakness, managed to get off 2 shots before ducking back behind the rocks. Elara aimed her revolver at a rider bearing down on her position. Her first shot went wide. Her second caught him in the leg, sending him tumbling. Then her hammer fell on an empty chamber and she was out of ammunition. The rider she'd wounded scrambled to his feet, blood streaming from his thigh, his gun rising toward her. Elara dove sideways just as 2 wolves' knife buried itself in the man's throat. He went down gurgling, his fingers clutching uselessly at the blade. The fight lasted maybe 90 seconds. When the dust settled, 3 of Cross's men were dead or dying, 1 had fled back down the canyon, and 2, including Cross himself, sat on their horses with their hands raised, surrounded by Ronan's guns. "Last chance," Ronan said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Who sent you?" Cross's smile never wavered. "Someone who's willing to pay more than you can imagine for what that woman's carrying. Someone who'll keep sending men until they get it. Name: Montgomery Pike. He owns half of San Francisco's mining operations. And he'll tear this territory apart to find the widow's vein." Ronan glanced at Elara. "You know him?" "My brother mentioned him. Said Pike tried to buy the map information and got violent when Thomas refused." Her voice shook with anger. "He's the one who hired Garrett. He's the one who killed my brother." "Then he's going to die," Ronan said simply. He turned back to Cross. "Take your friend. Ride back to Pike. Tell him the next men he sends, I'll gut and leave for the Crows. Tell him the woman is under my protection now, and that means something in this country. You understand?" "I understand." Cross gathered the reins of the riderless horse and helped his wounded companion mount. "But you're making a mistake, Hale. Pike doesn't stop. He doesn't negotiate. He takes what he wants, and he destroys what he can't have." "Then I guess we'll see who's better at destroying." Ronan raised his gun and fired a shot into the ground near Cross's horse, sending both animals bolting down the canyon at a gallop. Silence descended, broken only by the harsh breathing of the survivors and the moans of the dying. Cora moved among the wounded, finishing what needed to be finished with cold efficiency. 2 wolves retrieved his knife and cleaned it without expression. Diego helped Billy back to his feet, and Elara stood in the center of the canyon, her hands shaking, the reality of what she'd set in motion finally crashing down on her. Ronan holstered his gun and walked to her. "You knew this would happen." It wasn't a question. "I knew someone would come. I didn't know." She gestured helplessly at the bodies. "I didn't know it would be like this. This is what gold does. It makes men into animals and animals into demons." His gray eyes held hers without mercy or comfort. "And we're just getting started." They buried the dead quickly, marking the graves with stones so the scavengers wouldn't scatter the bones. No prayers, no ceremony, just dirt and rocks, and the weight of mortality pressing down on everyone. That night they made camp in a narrow defile protected on 3 sides by rock walls. Ronan posted guards in shifts, 2 at a time, with instructions to shoot anything that moved. Elara sat away from the fire, her back against cold stone, her mind replaying the violence of the afternoon. She'd killed a man, put a bullet in his leg that led to 2 wolves cutting his throat. The line between cause and effect was clear, and she couldn't pretend otherwise. Footsteps crunched on gravel. She looked up to find Cora settling beside her, a canteen in hand. "Drink," Elara obeyed automatically. "First time?" Cora asked. "Killing someone?" "Yes. Gets easier, unfortunately." The older woman pulled a cigarette from her pocket and lit it with a match struck on stone. "You're wondering if it was worth it, if whatever's in those mountains justifies this. Is it that obvious? It's always obvious. Everyone who comes out here chasing gold has that same moment, when the cost becomes real and they have to decide whether to turn back or keep going." Cora exhaled smoke toward the stars. "Most turn back. The ones who don't either find what they're looking for or die trying." "Which did you do?" "Neither. I found something worse than gold. I found out who I really was when the rules didn't apply anymore. She tapped ash from the cigarette. Turns out, I'm not a very nice person. But you're alive. There's that. Cora stood, grinding out the cigarette under her boot heel. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we enter the real mountains. Everything up to now has been the easy part. She walked away, leaving Elara alone with her thoughts and the cold comfort of stars that had watched better people make worse choices since the beginning of time. They rode into the Superstition Mountains at first light, leaving the Badlands behind for terrain so hostile it seemed designed specifically to kill humans. The trails, when they existed at all, wound through passages barely wide enough for a horse, with sheer drops on one side and crumbling rock faces on the other. The temperature swung wildly, scorching during the day and plummeting at night until ice formed on their water canteens. And always, the mountains watched. Elara felt it constantly, the weight of ancient stone, the sense that they were trespassing in a place that wanted them gone. Even the animals seemed wrong here. They saw rattlesnakes as thick as a man's arm, scorpions the size of dinner plates, and once, in the distance, something large and predatory that two wolves refused to name. On the 5th day in the mountains, they reached Dead Horse Canyon. The entrance was marked by the bleached skulls of 2 horses, their bones picked clean by scavengers, their empty eye sockets staring at nothing. Beyond, the canyon stretched like a throat into darkness, its walls so close they'd have to ride single file. Ronan called a halt and glassed the canyon with his telescope. Minutes passed. Finally, he lowered the scope and turned to 2 wolves. You see it? Yes. Halfway up the north wall, watching. How many? 3, maybe 4. Diego checked his rifle. Apache? No. 2 Wolves' voice carried an edge of something that might have been respect. Survivors. That single word changed everything. Survivors meant people who'd lasted in this hellscape long enough to become part of it, people who'd given up humanity in exchange for continued existence. They were more dangerous than any Apache war party because they had nothing left to lose. Can we go around? Elara asked. Ronan shook his head. Not without adding 3 days to the route, and we're already running low on water. So we go through. We go through fast, and we go through ready to fight. They entered Dead Horse Canyon with weapons drawn and nerves stretched tight. The walls rose above them like the ribs of some great dead beast, blocking out most of the sky. The air was cooler here, but carried the stench of old death and desperation. They were halfway through when the first rock fell. It crashed down 20 feet ahead of them, large enough to crush a horse, followed by a sound like laughter echoing off the canyon walls. Ronan raised a hand, halting the group. "Show yourself!" he shouted. Silence. Then movement. Figures emerging from cracks in the rock face like spiders from their holes. 4 people, though calling them people was generous. They wore rags and animal skins, their faces burned dark by sun and wind, their eyes feral with hunger and madness. The largest one, a man with a beard like a tangled mat and teeth filed to points, pointed at the pack horses. "Food, give us food! We've got jerky and hardtack, that's all." Ronan kept his gun trained on the man's chest. "Take it and let us pass." "Not enough." The man's tongue darted out to wet his cracked lips. "Fresh meat. Been too long since we tasted fresh meat." Diego muttered something in Spanish that didn't need translation. "You're not eating our horses," Ronan said flatly. "And you're damn sure not eating us. Take the supplies or get nothing." The bearded man considered this, his head tilting like a bird examining an insect. Then he smiled, showing those filed teeth. "We take everything. We take the woman too. Been a long time since we had a woman." Time seemed to slow. Ronan's gun barked once, the bullet taking the bearded man in the center of his chest. He stumbled backward, surprise on his face, then toppled off the ledge and crashed to the canyon floor with a wet crunch. The other 3 survivors screamed, a sound that didn't belong in human throats, and charged down the rock face like animals. What followed wasn't a fight. It was slaughter. Cora's Winchester spoke 3 times in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. 2 wolves moved forward to meet the attackers with his knife, opening throats with the precision of a surgeon. Diego clubbed one down with his rifle stock, then shot another as they scrambled past. When the echoes faded, All 4 survivors lay dead or dying in the dust. "Move!" Ronan commanded. "Before more come!" They spurred their horses forward, galloping through the rest of the canyon as fast as the terrain allowed. Behind them, strange sounds echoed, howls and screeches that might have been grief or hunger or rage. They didn't stop until they cleared the canyon and emerged onto a plateau where the sun felt clean and honest compared to that shadowed throat of stone. Billy was crying. Cora looked gray. Diego crossed himself repeatedly. Even 2 wolves seemed shaken, his dark eyes haunted by what they'd seen. Only Ronan appeared unchanged, his expression as flat as ever. "Welcome to the Superstitions," he said. "It gets worse from here." And as the sun sank toward the western horizon and shadows crept across the plateau like grasping fingers, Elara realized he was probably right. The plateau offered no comfort, only exposure. They made camp in a depression between 2 rock formations that provided minimal shelter from the wind that had started to howl across the mountain peaks like something wounded and angry. No fire tonight. Ronan's orders. Too many eyes watching from too many directions. Elara sat with her back against cold stone, chewing jerky that tasted like leather and trying not to think about the filed teeth of the man Ronan had killed, trying not to remember the hunger in those feral eyes when they'd looked at her. She'd seen desperation before, had felt it clawing at her own chest during the worst moments after Thomas died. But what lived in Dead Horse Canyon wasn't desperation anymore. It was something that had moved past human and into territory that had no name. "You're thinking too loud," Cora said, settling beside her in the darkness. The older woman moved with the stiffness of someone whose body was keeping score of every hard mile. "I can hear it from across camp." "How do you stop seeing it?" Elara asked quietly. "The things we've done. The things we've seen." "You don't. You just get better at carrying the weight." Cora pulled her canteen and took a careful sip, rationing water they couldn't afford to waste. "But if you're looking for absolution or comfort, you won't find it out here. The mountains don't care about your conscience." "What do they care about?" "Strength, luck, and knowing when to quit." Cora's eyes found Elara's in the starlight. "You ever think about that? Just turning around and walking away from whatever your brother died for? Every minute of every day. But you keep riding. Because walking away means he died for nothing, and I can't live with that." Cora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your brother, did he know what this map would cost?" "He knew. He did it anyway." Elara's voice hardened with something that might have been pride or might have been anger. "Thomas always believed the world owed him something better than the hand we were dealt. Our father was a drunk who beat our mother until she couldn't stand up straight. She drowned herself in the Rio Grande when I was 8. Thomas was 12. We spent the next 6 years in workhouses and charity homes, getting kicked from one place to another until Thomas was old enough to strike out on his own. And he took you with him. Always. He said family was the only thing that mattered, the only thing that couldn't be taken away." Elara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Turns out he was wrong about that too." Cora stood, her joints popping in the cold. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we hit the real elevation, and the air gets thin enough that every step feels like drowning on land." She walked away, leaving Elara alone with memories that cut deeper than any knife. She closed her eyes and tried to find rest, but sleep was a country she couldn't reach. Instead, she lay in the darkness listening to the wind scream across the peaks and wondering how many other desperate people had died in these mountains chasing dreams that turned to dust in their hands. Somewhere in the small hours before dawn, she finally drifted off. Her dreams were filled with Thomas's face, his eyes accusing, his mouth forming words she couldn't hear over the sound of gunfire that echoed forever. They were moving again before the sun cleared the eastern peaks, climbing trails that switched back and forth across slopes so steep that one missed step would send horse and rider tumbling hundreds of feet into canyons that looked like open graves. The air thinned with each hour, making every breath a conscious effort, turning simple tasks into exhausting labor. Billy was struggling again. The young man's face had taken on a grayish cast, his lips cracked and bleeding despite the salve Cora had given him. He swayed in his saddle like a drunk, barely able to hold his reins. "He needs rest," Diego said, riding up beside Ronan. Real rest, not just a few hours on cold ground. We all need rest. We're not getting it. He's just a boy. He's a man who took this job knowing the risks. But Ronan's voice carried less certainty than his words. He called a halt and dismounted, walking back to where Billy sat slumped over his horse's neck. "Look at me." Billy raised his head slowly, his eyes unfocused. "You hurting?" "Everything hurts, Mr. Hale. My head feels like it's being crushed in a vice. I can't catch my breath." "Altitude sickness. Your body's not getting enough air." Ronan pulled a small leather pouch from his saddlebag and shook out dried leaves that looked almost black. "Chew these. Don't swallow them. Just let them sit in your cheek. It'll help with the breathing." "What is it?" "Something two wolves gave me. Don't ask questions, just use it." Billy took the leaves with trembling fingers and did as instructed. Within minutes, some color returned to his face, and his breathing eased slightly. "Can you ride?" Ronan asked. "I can ride." "Then we keep moving, but if you feel like you're going to pass out, you tell me immediately. Up here, a fall doesn't just hurt, it kills." They climbed higher, entering a landscape that looked like the surface of the moon, all bare rock and twisted formations shaped by wind and time into shapes that suggested giants or demons or the bones of the earth itself exposed to merciless sky. Nothing grew here except for patches of lichen that clung to stone like disease. The only sounds were the wind and the clatter of horseshoes on rock and the harsh breathing of people pushed past their limits. It was two wolves who spotted the cairns. He dismounted without a word and walked to a pile of stones stacked in a deliberate pattern, too precise to be natural, too old to be recent. His fingers traced symbols carved into the largest stone, worn smooth by centuries of weather. "Warning marker," he said. "Very old, older than my people." Ronan joined him. Warning about what? Death, madness, places where the spirits are angry and the earth is sick. Two wolves straightened, his dark eyes scanning the terrain ahead. "We're close to something. Something that's been here a long time." "The mine?" Elara asked, hope and dread mixing in her chest. "Maybe. Or maybe something worse." The Comanche returned to his horse and mounted in a single fluid motion. "We should turn back." "We can't turn back," Elara said. "We're too far in." "That's why we should turn back. Before we're too far in to get out." But Ronan was already moving forward, following a trail that was barely visible, just faint depressions in the rock where feet had walked countless times over countless years, wearing grooves that time couldn't erase completely. They followed those ancient footsteps deeper into the mountains, higher into air that burned their lungs, further from any hope of quick escape. And as the sun arced across the sky and began its descent toward evening, they came upon the first body. It was mummified by the dry mountain air, reduced to leather skin stretched over bone, its clothes rotted to tatters. A prospector, from the look of what remained, the boots, the broken pick hammer still clutched in skeletal fingers. But what stopped everyone cold was the expression frozen on what remained of the face. Terror, absolute, mindless terror. "He didn't die easy," Diego said quietly, crossing himself despite Ronan's earlier prohibition against such gestures. Cora dismounted and examined the corpse with professional detachment. "No obvious wounds, no signs of violence. He just died." "Fear can kill," Two Wolves said. "I've seen it. The heart stops when the mind can't accept what it's seeing." "What could scare a man to death out here?" Billy asked, his voice small. "Lots of things," Ronan said. "And we're about to find out." They left the corpse where it lay and pressed on, but the discovery had changed something in the group. Even Cora, who'd seemed unshakable until now, rode with her rifle across her lap instead of in its scabbard. Diego muttered prayers in Spanish under his breath. Billy looked like he might be sick. Only Two Wolves seemed unchanged, his expression as calm as ever, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings with the vigilance of a man who expected death at any moment but wouldn't give it the satisfaction of fear. They found 3 more bodies before nightfall. All prospectors, all dead without visible cause, all wearing that same expression of terminal horror. When they made camp that night in a narrow cleft between 2 rock spires, no one spoke much. They ate cold food in silence and took turns on watch in shifts that felt inadequate against whatever had killed those men. Elara couldn't sleep. She sat with her back against stone, the partial map heavy against her chest, and wondered what Thomas had known that he hadn't told her. He'd been many things, a dreamer, a schemer, a man who believed in better tomorrows. But he hadn't been stupid. If he'd come this far, if he'd mapped these routes and marked these coordinates, he must have known about the bodies, must have known about the warning cairns. So why had he pressed on? Because he was like you, Ronan said quietly, appearing beside her like smoke. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't walk away even when walking away was the smart choice. You were awake. Been awake for 3 days, sleep's a luxury out here. He settled onto the ground next to her, his movements economical and careful. Want to tell me what you're thinking? I'm thinking my brother was either very brave or very foolish. Most likely both. Those two things walk hand in hand more often than not. Ronan pulled a cigarette from his pocket but didn't light it, just held it between his fingers like a talisman. You want to know something? I knew your brother. The words hit Elara like a physical blow. What? Not well, but we crossed paths about a year ago in Tucson. He was asking around about guides for the superstitions, and my name came up. We had a drink. He told me about this map, about his theory that the Widow's Vein wasn't just one mine, but a whole network of gold deposits connected by ancient tunnel systems. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted to see if you were like him, if you had that same fire, that same stubborn refusal to accept the world as it is. Ronan finally lit the cigarette, cupping his hands against the wind. He offered me $5,000 to guide him. I said no. Why? Because I could see he was going to die out here. Some people carry death with them like a shadow. And it doesn't matter how smart they are or how prepared, the mountains are going to take them. Your brother had that shadow. His eyes found hers in the darkness. So do you. Then why did you agree to guide me? Because saying no to him haunts me. Because maybe if I'd said yes, I could have kept him alive. And because he took a long drag on the cigarette. Because I'm tired of being the kind of man who walks away from people who need help. Elara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, What happened to you? Hoskins said you used to be different. I was a lot of things. Army scout, town marshal, husband and father. His voice went flat, emotionless. Then the Apache raided a settlement where my family was staying. When the cavalry arrived 3 days later, everyone was dead. My wife, my daughter, 47 people, all killed or taken. The survivors lasted maybe 2 more days in the desert before they died of thirst and exposure. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 5 years ago. I've had plenty of time to make peace with it. But the way he said it suggested he'd made no peace at all. Just learned to carry the weight. Point is, I know what it's like to chase something into these mountains because you can't let it go, and I know what it costs. Did you find them, the Apache who did it? Found them, killed them. Didn't make any difference. He ground out the cigarette under his boot heel. Turns out revenge doesn't fill the hole. It just gives you something to do while the hole swallows you. He stood and walked back to his bedroll, leaving Elara alone with her thoughts and the cold knowledge that everyone in this camp was damaged in ways that couldn't be fixed. They were all chasing something, gold or redemption, or just the ability to feel alive again, into a place that specialized in taking everything and giving nothing back. Morning came with a sky the color of old bruises and a temperature that had dropped near freezing. They broke camp quickly, hands clumsy with cold, breath-forming clouds that dissipated in the thin air. Billy could barely stand, his altitude sickness worsening despite 2 wolves' remedies. Diego had developed a cough that sounded wet and dangerous. Even Cora moved with visible pain, her left knee swollen from a fall the day before that she'd tried to hide. They were falling apart, and they weren't even at the mine yet. How much further? Ronan asked Elara as they prepared to mount up. According to the first map, we should reach the general area today, but I'll need to use the second half to pinpoint the exact location. Then it's time. Show me. Elara hesitated. Once she revealed the complete map, her only leverage disappeared. She'd be just another person who could be left behind or killed if the group decided they didn't need her anymore. But looking at Ronan's face, at the exhaustion and determination etched into every line, she made a choice. She reached into her coat and pulled out the second piece of parchment, sewn into the lining of her corset. Her fingers fumbled with the stitches until the fabric gave way and the map emerged, folded small and protected by oilcloth. She spread both pieces on a flat rock, and for the first time the complete route was visible. It was more detailed than she'd imagined. Thomas had marked not just the mine entrance, but multiple shafts, ventilation openings, and what looked like an underground water source. He'd noted geological features, listed potential hazards, and written calculations in the margins that suggested the gold deposits were real and substantial. But what caught everyone's attention was the notation in red ink near the center of the map. Warning, cave system unstable, frequent rock falls. Multiple expeditions lost underground 1876 to 1879. Possible toxic gas in lower tunnels. Your brother knew, Diego said quietly. He knew it was a death trap. He knew it was dangerous, Elara corrected. He also knew it was worth the risk. Worth dying for. Worth trying for. She looked up at the group, meeting each set of eyes in turn. I won't blame anyone who wants to turn back now. You've gotten me this far. That's more than I could have hoped for. No one moved. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind moaning through the peaks. Then Cora said, Hell, I've come this far. Might as well see it through. I stay, Diego added. A man doesn't walk away from a thing just because it's hard. Two wolves gave a single nod. Billy tried to speak, but ended up just nodding as well, too exhausted for words. Ronan studied the map for another minute, then rolled it up carefully. We ride, but we do this smart. Two wolves, you scout ahead. Diego, you stay with Billy. If he can't continue, you both turn back. Cora, Elara, and I will be the primary team that enters the mine. Everyone clear? They were clear. The final approach took them through a slot canyon so narrow they had to dismount and lead the horses single file, their shoulders brushing rock on both sides. The walls rose hundreds of feet above them, blocking out the sun and turning day into perpetual twilight. Water had carved the passage over millennia, polishing the stone smooth and creating formations that looked like frozen waterfalls. Two wolves stopped suddenly, his hand raised in warning. Everyone froze. Blood, he said quietly. Fresh. Human. They found the body 30 feet ahead, a man in his 20s, his throat cut with surgical precision, his blood pooling on the stone. He'd been dead maybe an hour, his body still warm despite the cold. This is wrong, Cora said, her rifle up and scanning the canyon walls. We're being herded. She's right, Ronan agreed. Someone's pushing us towards something. Or guarding something, Elara added. If the mine's real, and if the gold's real, then maybe someone's already claimed it. Or maybe something worse is waiting. Two wolves knelt beside the corpse, his fingers tracing marks on the man's hands. Defensive wounds, the kind you get when you're trying to fight off someone with a blade. He didn't die easy. He fought. A sound echoed through the canyon, laughter, cold and mocking, bouncing off the walls until it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Then a voice. Welcome, Miss Voss. We've been waiting for you. Figures emerged from cracks in the rock face, 6 of them, armed with rifles and revolvers, led by a man Elara recognized from wanted posters in every town from here to California. Malachi Stone, a killer and outlaw who'd made a career of robbing mining operations and leaving no witnesses. Stone was tall and lean, with a face that looked like it had been carved with a dull knife, and eyes that held the kind of emptiness that comes from killing so many people that it stops meaning anything. He smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Montgomery Pike sends his regards, Stone said, his voice carrying an accent that suggested education corrupted by violence. He figured you'd make it this far, stubborn, just like your brother. Thomas talked a lot before he died. Did you know that? Told us everything about the map, about how it was split in two, about how you'd never give up. He chuckled. He was right about that part. Rage flooded through Elara like fire through dry grass. You killed him. I did. Put 3 bullets in his back while his partner Garrett held him down. Pike paid me $1,000 for the job. Best money I ever made, considering how much fun I had doing it. Ronan's hand drifted toward his gun. Stone noticed and shook his head. I wouldn't. My boys have you covered from 3 angles. You'd be dead before you cleared leather. He gestured with his rifle. Now, Here's how this works. You give me both pieces of that map, I let most of you walk out of here alive. Emphasis on most. Miss Voss stays with me. Pike wants her, and what Pike wants, Pike gets. Go to hell, Elara said. Already there, sweetheart. Already there. Stone's smile widened. But if you won't be reasonable, I'll just kill all your friends right now and take the map off your corpse. Your choice. The canyon exploded into violence. 2 wolves moved first, his knife flashing as he hurled it at the nearest gunman. The blade took the man in the throat, dropping him instantly. Diego and Cora fired simultaneously, their shots echoing like thunder in the confined space. Ronan drew and shot Stone's rifle out of his hands, the weapon spinning away in pieces. But Stone's men were professionals. They returned fire with disciplined accuracy, bullets ricocheting off Stone, sparks flying in the dim light. Billy went down with a cry, blood spreading across his shoulder. Diego stumbled, hit in the leg, but kept firing. Cora dropped behind a rock outcropping, working her Winchester with mechanical precision. Elara pulled her revolver, loaded now, thanks to ammunition Ronan had provided, and fired at a gunman trying to flank their position. Her first shot missed. Her second hit him in the chest, punching through ribs and lung. He fell backward off the rock face and crashed to the canyon floor with a sound like breaking pottery. Stone had pulled a revolver and was advancing on Ronan, firing as he walked, bullets churning up stone and dust. Ronan returned fire, but his hammer fell on an empty chamber. He tossed the gun aside and pulled his knife in a single motion, closing the distance between them. The 2 men collided like rams, Stone's size against Ronan's speed. They went down in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the blood-slicked stone, each trying to drive a blade into the other's heart. Stone was stronger, but Ronan was meaner, his movements driven by 5 years of rage that had finally found a target worthy of its intensity. Around them, the fight raged on. Cora's rifle fell silent, jammed or empty, and she pulled a revolver, shooting a gunman who'd gotten too close. Diego dragged Billy behind cover while firing one-handed, his leg leaving a trail of blood. 2 wolves had retrieved his knife and was moving through the chaos like death itself, appearing behind one of Stone's men and opening his throat before vanishing into shadow again. Then everything changed. A sound like thunder rolled through the canyon, not from guns, but from the rock itself. The ground shook, a tremor that threw everyone off balance. Dust and pebbles rained down from above. Cracks appeared in the canyon walls, spreading like lightning across the stone. "Cave in!" Cora shouted. "The whole canyon's coming down!" Stone broke away from Ronan, blood streaming from a cut across his face. "Fall back," he ordered his remaining men. "Fall back now!" But there was nowhere to fall back to. The canyon behind them was collapsing, massive slabs of rock breaking free and crashing down with enough force to pulverize anything beneath them. The only way out was forward, toward the mine entrance that was now visible ahead, a black mouth in the canyon wall partially hidden by fallen debris. "Move!" Ronan grabbed Elara's arm and pulled her forward. "Into the mine! It's our only chance!" They ran, stumbling over rubble and bodies, the world coming apart around them in slow motion. Diego half-carried Billy. Cora and 2 wolves covered their retreat, firing at Stone's men who were also running for the mine entrance because it was the only shelter available. The canyon floor heaved like the deck of a ship in a storm. More rock fell, crushing one of Stone's men beneath tons of stone. Another was caught by a falling boulder that left nothing but a red smear. And then they were through, diving into the mine entrance as the canyon behind them collapsed completely, sealing them in darkness with tons of rock and dust and the certain knowledge that there was no going back. The dust took forever to settle. When it did, they found themselves in a tunnel carved from living rock, high enough to stand in, wide enough for 3 people to walk abreast. The air was cold and stale, tasting of minerals and age. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped with the patience of stone. Ronan lit a lantern with shaking hands. The light revealed their situation. 8 people alive: Ronan, Elara, Cora, Diego, Billy, 2 wolves, and 2 of Stone's men, including Stone himself. The entrance behind them was sealed solid. Hundreds of tons of rock separated them from the outside world. They were trapped in the mountain with the mine they'd been seeking, and with each other. Stone stood against the far wall, his revolver trained on the group, blood dripping from his face. His remaining man, a scarred brute named Cutter, had his rifle ready. "Well," Stone said, his voice echoing in the confined space, "looks like we're all going to get real friendly, real fast." The lantern light carved shifting shadows on the tunnel walls, making the confined space feel even smaller. 8 people breathing the same stale air, weapons drawn, trust as dead as the men buried under tons of rock outside. The silence stretched like wire pulled to breaking point. Ronan moved first, positioning himself between Stone and Elara. His hand rested on the grip of his reloaded revolver, thumb near the hammer. "Put the gun down, Stone." "Not likely." Stone's smile was all teeth and malice. "We're trapped in here together, sure, but that doesn't make us friends. The way I see it, only one group's walking out of this mountain with that gold, and it's going to be mine." "There's no walking out." Cora gestured toward the collapsed entrance with her rifle. "That's 100 tons of rock minimum. We dig through that, we'll just bring more down on our heads. Then we find another way out." Stone's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "These old mine systems always have multiple shafts, ventilation tunnels, emergency exits. The map will show us." "The map's not yours," Elara said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her gut. "Everything's mine if I'm the one holding the gun, sweetheart." "Enough!" 2 wolves stepped forward, his weathered face impassive. "We fight here, we all die. The air in this tunnel is limited. We have maybe 3 days before we suffocate, less if we're shooting and running and wasting oxygen on stupidity." Diego, still applying pressure to the wound in his leg, nodded agreement. "The Comanche's right. We need to work together or none of us leaves." "Together." Stone laughed, the sound bouncing off Stone. "With the people who just killed 3 of my men? I don't think so." "You killed more of yours than we did," Cora pointed out. "That cave-in was your doing. You fired shots into unstable rock." "Detail." Stone waved his gun dismissively. "Point is, we're here now, and somebody's got to be in charge. I vote for me." "I vote for you eating a bullet," Ronan said quietly. The tension ratcheted tighter. Cutter raised his rifle, finger on the trigger. 2 wolves' hand drifted to his knife. Billy, pale and bleeding from his shoulder wound, tried to sit up straighter against the wall. One wrong word, one sudden movement, and the tunnel would become a slaughterhouse. Then Elara did something unexpected. She stepped between the 2 groups right into the line of fire and pulled out both pieces of the map. "You want this? Fine. We all get it together or nobody gets it, but we're not shooting each other in the dark like animals." "Elara," Ronan started. "No." She unfolded the parchment, holding it where everyone could see. "This is what my brother died for. This is what we've all killed for. So let's at least see if it's real before we murder each other over it." Stone studied her for a long moment, then slowly lowered his revolver. "You've got backbone, I'll give you that. Stupid backbone, but backbone nonetheless." He holstered the weapon with exaggerated care. "All right, temporary truce. We find the gold, we figure out how to get out of here, then we settle accounts. Deal?" "Deal," Ronan said, though his hand never left his gun. The group arranged themselves in a rough circle around the map, weapons still close but no longer pointed at each other. The lamplight flickered across Thomas's careful notations, revealing details Elara hadn't fully studied before. Her brother's handwriting covered the margins, observations about rock formations, calculations about vein depth, warnings about unstable sections. "Here!" 2 wolves pointed to a marking near what appeared to be the main shaft. "This symbol. Very old. Older than Spanish, older than my people's time in these mountains. It marks sacred ground." "Sacred or cursed?" Cora asked. "Sometimes the same thing." Stone leaned closer, his breath smelling of tobacco and decay. "I don't care if it's blessed by angels or damned by demons. I care about gold. Where's the main deposit?" Elara traced her finger along the tunnel system Thomas had mapped. "According to this, the primary vein runs deep, maybe 200 feet below where we're standing now. But there are multiple shafts, and most of them have collapsed over the years. This route here," she indicated a passage marked in red, "should be stable. It leads to what Thomas called the cathedral." "Cathedral?" Diego asked. "A large chamber where multiple veins converge. If the gold's anywhere, it's there." "And if it's not?" Then we die having chased a legend. Elara's voice held no tremor. But at least we'll know. Billy coughed, a wet sound that rattled in his chest. Blood flecked his lips. How far? To this cathedral? Ronan checked the map's scale, his finger measuring distances. Maybe a mile. Through tunnels that are over a century old and potentially unstable. With limited light, limited air, and 2 wounded men. He looked at Billy and Diego. You two should stay here. Conserve oxygen. I didn't come this far to sit in the dark, Billy said, trying to stand. He made it halfway before his legs buckled. Diego caught him, easing him back down. You're staying, Diego said firmly. That shoulder wound's infected. I can smell it. You go deeper into this mountain, you'll be dead before we find anything. But no arguments. I stay with you. The others go ahead. Diego met Ronan's eyes. You find the gold, you come back for us. You find nothing, you still come back. Understood? Understood. Stone pulled a pocket watch from his vest, checking the time, though it meant nothing underground. We're burning darkness. Let's move. They gathered what supplies they had. 3 lanterns, some rope, canteens of water that wouldn't last long, and weapons they prayed they wouldn't need to use on each other. Diego and Billy were left with 1 lantern and enough ammunition to defend themselves if something came through the darkness. Something or someone. The remaining 6 moved deeper into the mountain. Ronan took point, his lantern held high, followed by 2 wolves who moved with the silent grace of smoke. Elara came next, the map in her hands, with Cora close behind. Stone and Cutter brought up the rear, ostensibly watching for threats from behind, but more likely watching for opportunities to put bullets in backs. The tunnel sloped downward at a gentle angle, the walls showing marks of picks and chisels where men had carved their way through living rock 100 years ago. The air grew colder with each step, and strange sounds echoed through the passages, dripping water, the settling of ancient stone, and occasionally something that might have been wind but felt more like breathing. Your brother came down here alone? Cora asked Elara quietly. With a partner, a geologist named Morrison, who supposedly died in a rock fall. Elara's voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loud might wake something best left sleeping. But Thomas never believed the official story. He thought Morrison found something and disappeared deliberately. Or was disappeared. That too. They reached a junction where 3 tunnels split off in different directions. Thomas's map indicated the middle path, but when Ronan held his lantern up, they could see that passage had partially collapsed. The other 2 tunnels showed no markings on the map. Now what? Stone demanded. 2 wolves knelt at the entrance to each tunnel, studying the ground. His fingers traced patterns in the dust, boot prints, drag marks, something that might have been blood long dried. People came through here recently, maybe 3 days ago. How many? 4, maybe 5. The Comanche straightened. They took the left tunnel. And did they come back out? 2 Wolves was silent for a long moment. Then he said, No. Stone swore under his breath. So we follow dead men into the dark. Wonderful. We follow the map, Elara insisted. The middle tunnel. We can dig through that collapse. And bring the whole mountain down on our heads again? Stone shook his head. We take the left. Whatever killed those others, we'll be ready for it. We take the middle, Ronan said. That's the path Thomas mapped. He wouldn't have marked it if it wasn't passable. He also died, in case you forgot. I haven't forgotten anything. The 2 men faced each other in the lamplight, and for a moment it looked like the truce would shatter right there. But then Cutter spoke for the first time since entering the mine, his voice rough as gravel on bone. The air's wrong in the left tunnel. Can't you smell it? Everyone fell silent, breathing carefully. And yes, there was something. A faint chemical odor underlying the mineral smell of the mine, sweet and rotten at the same time. Gas, Cora said. Probably from decaying organic material or some kind of chemical reaction in the rock. We go down there without proper ventilation, we'll be dead in minutes. Stone's jaw worked. Fine. Middle tunnel. But we're not digging for hours. We clear enough to squeeze through and we keep moving. They worked in shifts, 2 people at a time pulling away loose rock while the others kept watch and conserved their strength. The labor was brutal in the confined space, lifting stones, breathing dust, fighting the constant fear that the next rock moved would bring the ceiling down on their heads. It took an hour to clear a gap big enough to crawl through. Ronan went first, pushing his lantern ahead and dragging himself through on his belly. His voice echoed back. "It's stable. Come through one at a time." Two wolves followed, then Elara, the map tucked inside her shirt to keep it safe. The gap was tight, pressing against her shoulders and hips, the stone cold through her clothes. For a terrible moment she thought she was stuck, wedged in rock with tons of mountain above and below. But then Ronan's hand found hers and pulled her through into a wider passage. Cora came next, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd survived worse than tight spaces. Stone and Cutter followed, both men breathing hard from exertion and the diminishing air quality. On this side of the collapse, the tunnel showed signs of water damage, minerals leaching from the walls in strange formations, pools of standing water that reflected the lantern light like oil. The temperature had dropped noticeably, cold enough that their breath came out in clouds. "We're below the water table," two wolves observed. "This tunnel floods during spring melt." "What month is it?" Stone asked. "Late April." "Perfect. So we're racing water and suffocation and whatever killed those other prospectors." Stone wiped sweat from his face despite the cold. "This just gets better." They pressed on, the tunnel winding deeper and deeper into the mountain's heart. The map showed they were close now, maybe another quarter-mile to the cathedral chamber. But distance underground wasn't like distance on the surface. Every step was a negotiation with darkness and doubt. Elara's lantern began to flicker. The oil was running low. She adjusted the wick, trying to coax more light from what remained, but the truth was inescapable. They were running out of everything. Time, air, light, hope. Then the tunnel opened up. One moment they were in a confined passage barely wide enough for single file. The next they stumbled into a space so vast the lantern light couldn't reach the ceiling. The walls were crusted with mineral deposits that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 glittering reflections. Stalactites hung like frozen waterfalls. And in the center of the chamber, rising from a pool of perfectly still water, stood formations that looked disturbingly like human figures frozen in stone. "Sweet merciful," Cora breathed. "The cathedral," Elara whispered. But what stopped everyone cold wasn't the chamber's beauty. It was what lay at the far end, a wall of rock shot through with veins of quartz that glittered gold in the lamplight. Not iron pyrite, not fool's gold, real gold, thick veins of it running through the stone like the arteries of some vast sleeping beast. The widow's vein was real. Stone laughed, a sound edged with hysteria. "It's real. Sweet hell, it's actually real. It's..." He rushed forward, Cutter following, both men drawn to the gold like moths to flame. Ronan caught Elara's arm. "Something's wrong." "What?" "This." He gestured around the chamber. "It's too perfect, too untouched. If Morrison and those other prospectors made it this far, where are their tools, their marks, their bodies?" Two wolves was already circling the chamber's perimeter, his eyes scanning the ground. "He's right. No one's worked this deposit. The stone's undisturbed." "Maybe they never found it," Cora suggested. "Maybe they died in the tunnels before—" She stopped. They all heard it. A sound like stone grinding against stone, coming from the passage they'd just left. Then voices, faint but getting closer. "Someone else is down here," Ronan said quietly. The grinding stopped. The voices fell silent. Then a new sound filled the cathedral, laughter, echoing from multiple directions, impossible to pinpoint. And a voice, distorted by the acoustics but unmistakable. "Welcome to the widow's vein, Miss Voss. Your brother sends his regards from hell." Elara's blood turned to ice. That voice. She knew that voice. Stone whirled, his gun drawn. "Who's there? Show yourself!" Figures emerged from the shadows at the chamber's edges, 7 men, armed and positioned to cover every exit. And leading them, stepping into the lamplight with a smile that belonged on a snake, was Garrett, her brother's partner, the man who'd put 3 bullets in Thomas's back. But that wasn't what made Elara's world tilt sideways. What made reality crack was the man standing beside Garrett, very much alive despite the bullet she'd watched Ronan put through his chest 5 days ago. Samuel Cross. Impossible, Ronan said, his voice flat with shock. I killed you. Cross touched his chest, where a bruise showed, but no wound. You shot my vest. Good armor's worth its weight in gold. Speaking of which, he gestured grandly at the chamber. Quite the operation my employer's been running. Pike's been working this mine for 3 months. Different entrance, different approach. But we knew eventually someone would come through the original shaft, and we've been waiting. Stone's face had gone purple with rage. Pike hired me to kill these people and bring him the map. He didn't say anything about you already being here. Pike hired lots of people. Most of them died getting this far. Cross's smile widened. But you, Stone, you did exactly what we needed. You pushed them through the collapsed sections, forced them to clear the unstable tunnels, and led them right to us. Thank you for your service. You son of a... Cross shot him. The bullet took Stone in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to his knees. Cutter raised his rifle, but Cross's men were faster. 3 shots punched through the outlaw's chest, and he went down hard, dead before he hit the ground. Anyone else want to test their luck? Cross asked pleasantly. Ronan's hand was on his gun, but he didn't draw. The math was simple and brutal. 4 of them against 8, in an open chamber with no cover, already exhausted and running on fumes. They'd be slaughtered. Smart man, Cross said. Now, weapons on the ground, slowly. They complied, the metallic clatter of guns and knives hitting Stone echoing through the cathedral. Stone groaned, clutching his bleeding shoulder. No one moved to help him. Garrett stepped forward, his eyes finding Elara. You look good, healthier than Thomas did at the end. He died begging, did you know that? Begging me to let him live, promising me anything. Your name was the last word he spoke. Rage flooded through Elara like liquid fire. You're dead. You're all dead. Eventually, sure, but not today. Garrett pulled the map from her shirt with casual violence, tearing the fabric. Thanks for bringing this. Pike will be pleased. Pike's a fool if he thinks this mine is worth all this death. This mine? Garrett laughed. This is just the beginning. The Widow's Vein connects to a whole network of deposits running through these mountains. Enough gold to buy states, to influence elections, to build empires. Your brother understood that. It's why he had to die. And us? Cora asked, her voice steady despite the guns pointed at her chest. What happens to us? Cross considered the question. Normally, we'd just shoot you and collapse the tunnel behind us. But Pike wants Miss Voss alive. Something about making her watch while he strips everything her brother worked for. The rest of you, he shrugged. The mountain will take care of you. These chambers flood during runoff season. Should start any day now. You'll drown in the dark, which is honestly more mercy than you deserve. You can't leave us here, Billy's voice called from the tunnel entrance. The young man had followed them down, Diego supporting him, both men pale as ghosts. We're not animals. No, you're competitors, and Pike doesn't leave competitors breathing. Cross gestured to his men. Take the woman. Kill the others. What happened next happened fast. 2 wolves moved first, diving sideways as guns roared, scooping up Cutter's dropped rifle and firing from the ground. His shot took one of Cross's men in the face. Ronan lunged for his own weapon, rolling behind one of the stone formations as bullets chewed up rock around him. Cora grabbed Elara and pulled her down into the water pool, the cold shocking the breath from their lungs. Diego, despite his wounded leg, charged forward with a roar that echoed through the cathedral. He had nothing but his bare hands, but those hands found Garrett's throat and squeezed. Garrett's eyes bulged as he clawed at Diego's grip, his face turning purple. Cross shot Diego 3 times in the back. The Mexican fell, taking Garrett down with him, both men crashing into the shallow pool. Blood turned the water red. Diego's hands finally released their grip, and Garrett scrambled away, coughing and gasping. Billy had found a gun, Stone's dropped revolver, and was firing wildly, tears streaming down his face. One shot struck a lantern, plunging half the chamber into darkness. Another ricocheted off Stone and took one of Cross's men in the leg. Then Cross's remaining men opened up with coordinated fire, and the cathedral became hell. Bullets flew like hornets. Ronan returned fire from behind cover, his shots precise and economical. 2 wolves had disappeared into shadow, appearing only to fire and then vanishing again. Cora surfaced from the pool long enough to grab a dropped weapon and empty it at Cross's position. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every one of Cross's men they dropped, another appeared from the tunnels. Pike had sent an army into these mountains, and that army was winning. Stone, forgotten in the chaos, had crawled to the golden vein. Blood loss and shock had driven him past reason into some place where only the gold mattered. He clawed at it with bare hands, laughing as he peeled away chunks of quartz threaded with yellow metal. "Mine," he muttered. "All mine." Cross put a bullet through his head. "Enough!" Cross shouted over the gunfire. "Everyone stop or I start executing prisoners." The shooting ceased. In the ringing silence that followed, Elara could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Cora's grip on her arm like iron. "Come out," Cross commanded, "or I'll shoot the boy." Billy stood in the open, his gun empty, swaying on his feet. Two of Cross's men had him, their rifles pressed to his temples. Slowly, Ronan emerged from cover, hands raised. Two wolves stepped from shadow, his rifle lowered but not dropped. Cora and Elara climbed from the pool, soaked and shivering. They gathered in the center of the cathedral, surrounded by bodies and blood and broken stone. Diego lay face down in the red water, dead. Stone's corpse stared at the ceiling with empty eyes, one hand still clutching gold. Cutter was meat. Two of Cross's men were down, another wounded. And in the middle of it all stood Garrett, his throat bruised, his eyes full of vicious triumph. "Last chance," Cross said. "The woman comes with us. The rest of you can try to dig your way out through the collapsed tunnels. Maybe you'll make it. Probably you won't. But at least you'll die trying instead of taking bullets now." Ronan met Elara's eyes. She saw the question there, saw him calculating odds and angles, weighing lives against principles. She gave her head the smallest shake. "Don't," she mouthed. "Live." But before anyone could speak, before Cross could give the order to separate them, the cathedral filled with a sound that turned blood to ice, rushing water. It started as a whisper, then a roar, then a wall of liquid fury exploding from the tunnels. The spring melt two wolves had warned about had finally arrived, and it was coming with the force of a broken dam. "Run!" someone screamed, but there was nowhere to run. The water hit like a physical fist, cold and violent and unstoppable. It swept through the cathedral, tearing people from their feet, smashing bodies against stone, filling the chamber with liquid chaos. Elara went under, tumbling in darkness, her lungs screaming for air. Something hit her. A body, a rock, she couldn't tell, and pain exploded through her ribs. Then hands found her, pulled her up. She broke the surface gasping, saw Ronan's face close to hers, his arm locked around her waist. "Hold on!" They were being swept through a tunnel, the water carrying them like flotsam. All around them in the darkness, others struggled. She saw Cora's blonde hair, heard Billy screaming, caught a glimpse of Cross's face twisted with rage before he vanished under the surface. The tunnel opened up and they fell, dropping into another chamber, hitting water deep enough that the fall didn't kill them. Elara surfaced again, her limbs leaden, her body approaching the limits of what it could endure. "Here!" Two wolves' voice. "Ledge!" They swam toward it, fighting current that wanted to pull them deeper into the mountain. Ronan reached it first, hauling himself up, then reaching back for Elara. She grasped his hand and he pulled, muscles straining until she collapsed onto stone. Cora made it. Two wolves. Billy, barely conscious but breathing. The water continued to rise around them, but slower now, the worst of the flood surge passed. In the darkness broken only by a single surviving lantern wedged in the rocks, they could hear the mountain settling, the water finding its level. They were alive. For now. The ledge was barely 6 feet wide, carved into the chamber wall like a wound. Water lapped at its edge, dark and restless, carrying debris from the flood, splintered timber, chunks of ore, and things Elara didn't want to examine too closely. The single lantern threw grotesque shadows across the walls, making the survivors look like ghosts haunting their own deaths. Billy lay on his back, his breathing shallow and wet. The shoulder wound had reopened during the flood. An infection had spread its black tendrils up his neck. Cora knelt beside him, her hands gentle despite the exhaustion that made them shake. "He's burning up. Fever's taken hold." "Can you do anything?" Ronan asked, wringing water from his shirt with methodical movements that suggested a man keeping panic at bay through routine. Not down here. He needs clean water, proper bandages, antibiotics we don't have. Cora's voice was flat, delivering a diagnosis that carried the weight of a death sentence. Best I can do is make him comfortable. Comfortable. Billy's laugh turned into a cough that sprayed blood across his lips. That's what you say when someone's dying, right? Make them comfortable, like putting down a dog. You're not dying, Elara said, though the lie tasted bitter. Sure I am. Been dying since we entered these mountains. Just took me a while to notice. His eyes found hers in the lamplight, lucid despite the fever. Was it worth it? All this death for a hole in the ground? Elara had no answer. She looked away, staring at the water that had stolen Diego, that had swallowed Cross and Garrett and Stone and everyone else who'd been in the cathedral when the flood hit. Somewhere under that dark surface lay Thomas's dream, the gold they'd killed for, died for, sacrificed everything for. And none of it mattered now. Two wolves sat apart from the others, his back against Stone, his eyes closed in what might have been meditation or might have been surrender. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the water's whisper. We're going to die down here. Not helping, Cora snapped. Truth never does. The Comanche opened his eyes. The flood sealed the tunnels. The air's getting thinner. Can't you feel it? We've got maybe 12 hours before we suffocate. Maybe less. Ronan stood, his jaw tight with the kind of anger that comes from helplessness. Then we find another way out. These old mines always have ventilation shafts, emergency exits. Thomas wouldn't have mapped a death trap without marking the escape routes. Thomas is dead, Elara said quietly. And the map went under with Cross. The words fell like stones into still water. Without the map, they were blind. Without the map, every tunnel was a gamble that could lead to safety, or to a dead end where they'd die clawing at solid rock while their lungs burned for air that wasn't there. The map's not the only thing that went under, a voice called from the darkness beyond the lantern's reach. Everyone froze. Weapons came up. Two Wolves' knife, Ronan's revolver, miraculously still functional despite its dunking, Cora's hands closing around a rock because it was all she had left. A figure pulled itself onto the ledge 30 feet away, water streaming from its clothes. In the dim light, Elara recognized the bruised throat, the vicious eyes, the face of the man who'd murdered her brother. Garrett had survived. Easy now, he said, raising empty hands. I'm unarmed, lost everything in the flood. He coughed, spitting water. Seems we're all in the same sinking boat, or drowning cave, as it were. Give me one reason not to put a bullet in you right now, Ronan said, his gun steady despite the exhaustion. Because I know the way out. Liar. Maybe, but I'm the only liar you've got. Garrett moved closer, each step slow and deliberate. Pike's been working this mine for months. We mapped every tunnel, every shaft, every exit. There's a ventilation system that runs to the surface about half a mile from here. I can take you to it. Why would you? Elara's voice was ice and iron. Why would you help us after everything you've done? Because staying down here to prove a point about vengeance seems stupider than usual, even for me. Garrett's smile was a slash across his face. I'm a killer and a traitor, sure. But I'm not suicidal. I want to live. You want to live. Seems like we've got common ground. No. The word came from Billy, who'd struggled to sit up despite Cora's restraining hand. We don't work with him. We don't trust him. He killed Diego. He's the reason we're all dying. I killed Diego because he tried to kill me, Garrett corrected. Self-defense, if you want to get technical. And you're dying because you chased gold into a mountain that eats people. That's not my fault. That's yours. Enough. Two Wolves stood, his weathered face unreadable. The boy's right. We can't trust him, but he's also right that we need him. The question is which truth we choose to live by. There's no living with him, Elara said. The moment we turn our backs, he'll put a knife in them. Garrett spread his hands. No knife. No gun. Nothing but my word, which I know isn't worth much. But consider this. I need you as much as you need me. That ventilation shaft is behind a locked gate. Pike kept it secured to control access. The lock needs 2 sets of hands to operate, a safety feature so no one could escape alone if things went bad. So we're stuck with each other whether we like it or not. Ronan studied Garrett the way a man studies a snake that might be venomous or might just be ugly. You take us to this shaft, you go first. Anything happens, anything at all, you die before the rest of us do. Fair enough? And when we reach the surface? Cora asked. What then? Then you go your way and I go mine. I've got no love for Pike anymore. He sent me down here to die along with the rest of you. Far as I'm concerned, he can rot. You want revenge on him? That's your business. I just want out. The silence stretched. Outside their small circle of lamplight, the water continued its patient work of filling the chamber. It had risen another inch while they talked, would rise another foot by morning if they were still here to see it. The choice was simple and terrible. Trust a murderer or die. We go, Ronan finally said. But I'm walking behind you every step, and if you so much as breathe wrong, I'll make what Diego did to your throat look gentle. Understood. Garrett gestured toward a tunnel opening above the current waterline. That way. We've got maybe 5 miles of walking, some of it through tight spaces, and we need to move fast. The floodwater is going to destabilize sections that we're barely holding anyway. They gathered what little they had left. Billy couldn't walk on his own, so 2 wolves fashioned a crude stretcher from rope and pieces of timber that had washed up on the ledge. Cora and Ronan would take turns carrying the front, while 2 wolves handled the rear. It would slow them down, make the journey harder, but no one suggested leaving him behind. Some lines even desperate people wouldn't cross. They entered the tunnel single file, the lantern leading the way with light that grew dimmer with each passing minute. The oil was almost gone. When it finally guttered out, they'd be in darkness absolute, in a place where even 2 wolves' legendary tracking skills would be useless. The tunnel climbed, which was good. It meant they were moving away from the floodwater, but it also meant navigating steep inclines with a wounded man on a stretcher, their muscles screaming protest, their lungs working overtime in air that grew thinner with every step. How much further? Cora gasped after what felt like hours but might have been 30 minutes. Time underground became elastic, stretching and compressing without reference to sun or stars. 1.5 miles, Garrett said over his shoulder. Maybe 2. Hard to say without landmarks. You said 0.5 mile. I said the shaft was 0.5 mile. I didn't say it was a straight line. Garrett paused at a junction where 3 tunnels met, studying markings carved into the rock. This way. They took the left branch, ducking under a low overhang that scraped Ronan's back even when he crouched. The passage narrowed until they had to turn sideways, the stretcher barely fitting through gaps that seemed designed to keep something out or keep something in. Billy moaned, his head lolling. Leave me. You'll move faster. Shut up, Cora said without heat. We're not leaving anyone. Why not? Everyone else did. My pa left when I was 6. My ma left when I was 12, though she had the courtesy to die instead of just walking away. Every boss I ever worked for left me holding the bag when things went bad. Why should you be different? Because we are, Elara said, though she wasn't sure she believed it anymore. Wasn't sure about anything except the burning in her legs and the weight of Billy's suffering and the knowledge that Garrett walked ahead of them, leading them somewhere that might be escape or might be a more elaborate death. The tunnel opened into a chamber smaller than the cathedral, but large enough that echoes played tricks with sound. The lantern light caught something on the far wall, metal, gleaming dully through a coating of rust and mineral deposits. The ventilation shaft. It was larger than Elara had imagined, 6 feet in diameter, climbing straight up through the rock. Iron rungs formed a ladder on one side, and at the bottom sat a heavy gate secured with a mechanism that looked like something from a bank vault. There, Garrett said, gesturing. The lock I mentioned. See those 2 wheels? They have to be turned simultaneously, exactly opposite each other. One person can't reach both at the same time. Pike's insurance against solo escapes. Ronan approached the gate cautiously, his gun still trained on Garrett. He examined the mechanism, and Elara saw his shoulders slump slightly. He's not lying. This needs 2 people. So we open it, Cora said. Garrett and someone else. Not Garrett. Elara surprised herself with the vehemence in her voice. I'll do it. I need to be close to him anyway. Because she'd decided, somewhere during the long walk through darkness, that Garrett wasn't leaving this mountain alive. He might help them escape, might even keep his word about going separate ways. But Thomas's death required an accounting, and Elara would be the one to settle that debt. Ronan read something in her expression, understanding passing between them without words. He gave the smallest nod. All right, Elara and Garrett open the gate. The rest of us prepare to climb. Billy first, then. The chamber filled with the sound of falling rock. Not the catastrophic roar of a full collapse, but the warning rumble of stone giving way, of ancient supports finally surrendering to gravity and time. Dust fell from the ceiling in sheets. Cracks appeared in the walls, spreading like lightning. The flood undermined the supports, Two Wolves said, his voice urgent. This whole section's coming down. Open it now, Cora shouted. Elara and Garrett rushed to the gate, each taking position at one of the wheels. The metal was cold under her hands, crusty with rust that flaked away at her touch. On 3, Garrett said. 1, 2, 3. They turned together. The wheels were stiff, frozen by decades of disuse. Elara threw her full weight against it, feeling something in her shoulder pop, but the wheel moved. Beside her, Garrett strained, his face purpling with effort. The mechanism groaned, protesting, then slowly began to rotate. More rock fell. A support beam cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The chamber floor tilted as something major gave way beneath them. Faster! Ronan had Billy in his arms now, ready to carry him up the shaft the moment the gate opened. The wheels turned. 45 degrees, 90, 120. The gate's locking bolts began to retract, drawn back by gears that screamed in protest. Then Garrett stopped turning. What are you doing? Elara demanded. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with brutal strength. Change of plans. In his other hand, pulled from somewhere in his clothes, was a knife, short, sharp, hidden somehow through the flood. He pressed it against Elara's throat, the edge cold and sharp enough that she felt skin part. Garrett, don't, Ronan started, bringing his gun up. One more step and I open her throat. Garrett pulled Elara back from the gate, using her as a shield. Guns on the ground, all of them. You said you wanted out, Cora said, not lowering her weapon. We're giving you out. I want out alive. And the only way I stay alive is if I bring Pike something valuable. Miss Voss here is very valuable. Insurance policy against him deciding I'm expendable. The knife pressed deeper, and Elara felt blood trickle down her neck. So here's the new deal. You finish opening the gate, you climb up to freedom, and you leave her with me. Everyone lives. Sort of. No, Ronan said flatly. Not a negotiation. Garrett jerked Elara backward as the chamber shook again. A chunk of ceiling the size of a horse crashed down where they'd been standing moments before. Gate's not fully open yet. You need me to finish turning that wheel, but I'm not doing it unless you agree to my terms. Two wolves had moved without anyone noticing, circling to Garrett's blind side, but Garrett spotted him, the knife twitching in warning. Don't. I'll kill her before you take 2 steps. Then we all die here, Two Wolves said calmly, because we won't leave her. Yes, you will, because you're practical people. You've already left Diego, left Stone, left everyone else who slowed you down. She's just one more sacrifice on the altar of survival. Diego died fighting, Billy said, his voice weak but clear. Stone died being greedy. The others died being stupid. She doesn't die because you're a coward. Call me what you want, kid. Won't change the... Billy's hand came up holding a rock the size of a fist. He threw it with the last of his strength, and even weakened by fever and blood loss, his aim was true. The rock caught Garrett in the temple with a crack that echoed through the chamber. Garrett stumbled, his grip on Elara loosening. She drove her elbow into his gut, broke free, and dove away as Ronan's gun barked once. The bullet took Garrett in the shoulder, spinning him around. Two wolves closed the distance, his knife flashing, and suddenly Garrett was on the ground with a blade against his own throat. Finish it, Garrett gasped, blood running from his head and shoulder. Just finish it. Two wolves looked at Elara. Your call. She walked over slowly, standing above the man who'd killed her brother. She thought about Thomas, about his dreams and his stubbornness, and the way he'd always believed the world could be better if people just tried harder. She thought about all the death this map had caused, all the lives destroyed by gold that nobody would ever spend. No, she said finally. He finishes opening that gate, then he climbs up first. If he makes it to the surface, he's free. If he falls, he falls. Elara, Ronan started. I won't become him, she said, her voice hard as the stone around them. I won't kill a helpless man, even if he deserves it. That's not who my brother would want me to be. Another tremor shook the chamber. The ceiling groaned. They were out of time. Two wolves pulled Garrett to his feet and dragged him to the gate. Turn! Garrett turned his wheel. Two wolves turned the opposite one. The mechanism completed its rotation, and the gate swung open with a shriek of tortured metal, revealing the shaft climbing up through solid rock toward the surface they could no longer see or remember clearly. Go, two wolves said, shoving Garrett toward the ladder. Garrett looked back once, his eyes meeting Elara's. Your brother begged, he said, cried like a child. Just wanted you to know that. Then he started climbing, his movements hampered by his wounded shoulder, blood dripping from his injuries onto the ladder rungs below. Ronan lifted Billy, arranging the young man on his back. Hold on. Don't let go no matter what. Yes, sir. They began the climb, Ronan first with Billy, then Cora, then Elara, with two wolves bringing up the rear. The shaft was tight, the rungs slick with moisture and Garrett's blood. Above them, perhaps 200 feet above, Elara could see a distant circle of gray that might have been clouds, or might have been the promise of sky. The chamber below collapsed. The sound was apocalyptic, tons of rock giving way all at once, crashing down into the space they'd occupied seconds before. The shock wave rushed up the shaft, buffeting them with dust and debris. Elara clung to the ladder, feeling the rungs vibrate like tuning forks, expecting any moment for the shaft itself to collapse and send them plummeting into the void. But the shaft held. Whatever engineer had designed it a century ago had built it to last, and last it had. They climbed through darkness that gradually gave way to twilight, through air that slowly became breathable again. Elara's arms burned, her hands raw and bleeding from the metal rungs. Below her, two wolves climbed with steady patience. Above, she could hear Billy's labored breathing, could see Ronan's legs as he pulled them both up rung by rung, and further above, Garrett's blood continued to fall like rain. The climb took forever, took no time at all, became its own reality where the only things that existed were the next rung, the next breath, the next moment of not falling. Then Cora's voice. I see the top. The gray circle grew larger, became definite, became an opening with real light beyond it, pale and cold, but unmistakably real. Elara felt something in her chest crack open. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate relief of someone who'd accepted death and been given an unlikely reprieve. Cora pulled herself over the lip of the shaft and onto solid ground. Ronan followed with Billy. Elara hauled herself up, her arms shaking so badly she almost slipped at the last moment, but then hands, Ronan's hands, caught her and pulled her up into air that tasted like ice and freedom. Two wolves emerged last, standing in the snow that had begun to fall while they were underground. They were on a mountain slope, exposed and wind-scoured, but they were out. They were alive. Where's Garrett? Elara asked, looking around. Cora pointed down the slope. A trail of blood led away from the shaft, disappearing into the gathering snow. He climbed out first, stumbled off that way, didn't look back. Do we follow? Let him go, Ronan said. He's wounded, it's snowing, and we're miles from anywhere. If he makes it, he's earned it. If he doesn't, he shrugged. The mountains will judge him better than we can. They made a rough camp in the lee of some boulders, using rocks to block the wind and the emergency supplies they'd somehow managed to keep through everything. Billy was dying, that was clear now. The infection had spread too far, the fever too high. Cora did what she could, but it was comfort, not cure. As the sun set over the peaks, painting the snow gold and red, Billy looked up at the people who'd carried him out of hell. Did we find it? The gold? We found it, Elara said. Good, he smiled. That's good. Means it wasn't all for nothing. It wasn't for nothing, Ronan said, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he believed it. Billy died as the stars came out, his hand in Cora's, his last breath forming a cloud that dissipated into the vast indifference of mountain air. They buried him shallow, the ground was too frozen for more, and marked the grave with stones that would probably be covered by snow before morning. 4 of them left now, 4 survivors out of more than 20 who'd entered these mountains chasing dreams made of yellow metal and desperation. What now? Cora asked as they huddled around a small fire that gave more light than warmth. Now we walk down, Ronan said. Find civilization, find food and water and a place to sleep that isn't trying to kill us. And then? Then we decide if we're going after Pike. Elara looked up sharply. What? He's the one who started this. He's the one who killed Thomas, who sent all these people to die. Someone needs to answer for that. The gold is still in the mountain and likely to stay there. The tunnels are flooded, the main chamber collapsed. It had taken army and a fortune to excavate, and even then, Ronan shook his head. That gold is cursed, has been since the beginning. Best to let it lie. So we just walk away? Elara felt something twist inside her chest. Thomas died for nothing? Thomas died believing in something, Two Wolves said quietly. Whether that something was real doesn't matter. He died with purpose. That's more than most people get. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Somewhere in the darkness below, Garrett was either dying or surviving, either finding his way to safety or becoming just another corpse these mountains had claimed. Elara found she didn't care which. What she cared about was the weight that had lifted from her chest. The map was gone, the gold was gone. The dream that had consumed Thomas was finally, irrevocably finished. She felt emptied out, hollowed like a gourd, but there was relief in that emptiness. Room for something new to grow. I'm going after Pike, she said, not for the gold, for Thomas. He deserves someone to settle accounts. Then I'm coming with you, Ronan said. Pike needs to answer for Diego, for Billy, for everyone he fed into this mountain. And I've got nowhere else to be, Cora added. Might as well see this through. Two wolves stood, walking to the edge of their small camp where he could see the valley below. The spirits of this place are quiet now, satisfied. The gold remains where it belongs, and the people who tried to take it paid the price. He turned back. But Pike lives in San Francisco, in a city where spirits are weak and gold is God. Different rules there. Then we learn new rules, Elara said. They descended the mountain the next morning, moving slowly, supporting each other when the trail got treacherous. The snow had stopped, but the temperature had dropped, turning the slopes into sheets of ice that had to be negotiated with extreme care. It took 3 days to reach the foothills. 3 days of hunger and cold, and the grinding exhaustion of people who'd pushed past their limits and were now operating on will alone. But they made it, stumbling into a small mining settlement that looked at them like ghosts returning from the dead. Maybe they were ghosts. Maybe the mountain had taken the people they'd been and sent back something else, harder, colder, shaped by stone and darkness into new forms. They rested for a week, recovering strength, trading the few valuables they'd salvaged for supplies and information. And the information they got was interesting. Montgomery Pike's mining operations had collapsed. His main site in the Superstitions had flooded, killing everyone on site. His investors were pulling out. Rumors said he was desperate, taking meetings with dangerous people, making promises he couldn't keep. The mighty were falling, and the fall was gathering speed. He's vulnerable, Ronan said, studying a map of San Francisco spread across a rented room's table. Now's the time to move. Move how? Cora asked. We're not assassins. No, but we're witnesses. We know what he did, the people he killed, the laws he broke. We bring that information to the right people, the marshals, the territorial government, maybe even newspapers. And we bury him. You think testimony will work against a man with Pike's money? I think desperation makes men stupid, and Pike's desperate. Ronan traced a line on the map. We go to San Francisco. We tell our story. We watch him burn. Elara looked at the 3 people who'd survived the mountain with her. 2 wolves, whose quiet wisdom had kept them alive. Cora, whose strength had never faltered. Ronan, who'd given them all a reason to keep fighting when fighting seemed pointless. All right, she said. We finished this. They left for San Francisco on a clear morning, the mountain shrinking behind them with every mile. Somewhere up there in the frozen peaks, the widow's vein waited with its gold and its ghosts, its curses and its promises. Someday, maybe, someone else would find it, would die for it. would learn the same lessons Elara had learned about the price of dreams. But that was someone else's story now. Hers was just beginning. San Francisco rose from the bay like a promise made in stone and fog, its hills crowded with buildings that climbed toward a sky perpetually gray with sea mist and coal smoke. The city had grown fat on gold, other people's gold, dug from mountains and carried down by desperate men who traded their lives for wages that barely kept them fed. Montgomery Pike had built his empire on that desperation, and his mansion stood on Nob Hill like a monument to everything the widow's vein had cost. Elara stood at the window of their boarding house room, watching the street lamps flicker to life as evening settled over the city. 4 weeks had passed since they descended from the mountains. 4 weeks of travel, of healing, of planning what came next. Her ribs had mended where the flood had cracked them. The cuts on her hands had scarred over. But the weight she carried, the ghost of Thomas, the faces of Diego and Billy, and all the others, that weight remained. "You're thinking too loud again," Cora said from the chair where she sat cleaning a revolver they'd purchased with the last of their money. "I can hear it from here." "I'm thinking we might be making a mistake." Elara turned from the window. "Pike's got resources we don't. Money, connections, men who'll kill on his word. We're 4 people with a story no one might believe." "Then we make them believe." Ronan sat at the table, studying documents they'd spent weeks gathering, shipping manifests, mining claims, testimony from workers Pike had cheated or threatened. Not enough for a criminal conviction, maybe, but enough to ask uncomfortable questions, enough to start pulling threads. Pike's vulnerable right now. The Superstition operation collapsed, his investors are nervous, and rumors are spreading about how many men he's lost. We push at the right time, in the right way, and the whole structure comes down. Or it doesn't, and we end up floating in the bay with rocks tied to our ankles, Cora pointed out. Always a possibility. 2 wolves entered carrying food, bread, cheese, and apples purchased from a street vendor. He distributed the modest meal with the same calm efficiency he brought to everything. "I spoke with the dock workers today. Pike's been bringing in supplies for a new expedition, heavy equipment, mining explosives, more men. He's not giving up on the widow's vein." "He can't," Ronan said. "He's promised his investors a return. If he admits the operation's finished, they'll pull funding from his other ventures. He'll be bankrupt within 6 months. So he sends more people to die." Elara felt rage coil in her chest like a living thing. More bodies for the mountain to consume while he sits in his mansion counting money he doesn't have yet. "Not if we stop him," Ronan tapped the papers. "Tomorrow morning, we visit the territorial marshal's office. We bring everything we've gathered, the testimony, the evidence, the story of what happened in those mountains. Let the law handle Pike." "And if the law's in Pike's pocket?" Cora asked. "Then we try the newspapers. Public opinion can destroy a man as surely as bullets, and Pike lives in a world where reputation matters." Ronan's gray eyes were hard. "One way or another, we make him pay." They ate in silence, each lost in thoughts that couldn't be shared because they were too dark, too violent, too honest about what they'd become in the mountains. The city lights glowed beyond the window, thousands of people living lives that didn't involve gold or death, or the weight of ghosts. Elara envied them. The next morning broke cold and clear, fog burning off the bay to reveal a city in motion. Cable cars grinding up hills, merchants opening shops, workers streaming toward the docks and warehouses that made San Francisco's fortune. The territorial marshal's office sat in a stolid building near the waterfront, its facade marked by the territorial seal and the grim faces of men who'd seen humanity at its worst and were no longer surprised by anything. Marshal William Grayson listened to their story with the expression of a man hearing a familiar song played poorly. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered and thick through the middle, with a mustache that had probably been impressive 20 years ago and was now just gray and drooping. When they finished, he leaned back in his chair until it creaked. "That's quite a tale," he said finally. "Mountains, floods, murder, treasure. All you're missing is a sea monster." "It's not a tale," Elara said. "It's what happened." "What you say happened, but I'm curious. Where's your proof? Where are the bodies? Where's this famous map everyone died for?" "The bodies are in the mountains. The map was lost in the flood." "Convenient." Grayson picked up the documents Ronan had brought. These shipping manifests and worker complaints, they show Pike runs a hard operation, sure, maybe cuts some corners, but nothing here proves murder. Nothing proves conspiracy. What you've got is a story about a failed mining expedition where people died, which happens every day in this territory. Pike hired assassins to kill us, Ronan said, his voice level, but his hands clenched on the chair arms. He sent men to steal the map and eliminate anyone who knew about the widow's vein. So you say. But those men are dead, according to you. Can't testify to their employer's instructions if they're buried under a mountain. Grayson dropped the papers on his desk. Look, I'm sympathetic. Clearly something bad happened to you folks. But Montgomery Pike is a respected businessman with powerful friends. I can't go after him with nothing but your word and some circumstantial paperwork. He killed my brother, Elara said quietly. Then bring me proof. Bring me witnesses, physical evidence, something I can take to a judge. Otherwise, he spread his hands. I've got actual crimes to solve, murders I can prove. I'm sorry, but that's how the law works. Outside, standing on the street while workers flowed around them like water around stones, Cora lit a cigarette with hands that shook slightly. So much for the law. He's not wrong, Two Wolves said. We have truth but no proof. Truth without proof is just a story. Then we get proof. Ronan's jaw was set in the way Elara had learned meant he'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. Pike's planning another expedition. That means he's got records, maps, correspondence with the men he hired. We get into his mansion, we find those records, we bring them back to Grayson. You're talking about burglary, Cora pointed out. I'm talking about justice. It's suicide, Elara said. Pike's house will be guarded. Even if we get in, even if we find something, we'll never get out. So we don't all go in. One person, someone who can move quietly, who knows what to look for. Ronan turned to Two Wolves. Could you do it? The Comanche considered this, his dark eyes distant. I tracked Apache through terrain where a bent grass blade was the only sign they'd passed. I've entered enemy camps without being seen and left the same way. Yes, I could enter Pike's house, but finding specific papers in a mansion full of rooms, he shook his head. That's not tracking, that's luck. Then we make our own luck. Elara pulled out a folded newspaper she'd been carrying. Pike's hosting a party tomorrow night, a fundraiser for his mining operations trying to shore up investor confidence. The mansion will be full of people, guards will be watching the guests instead of the empty rooms. That's when we go in. We? Ronan asked. I know what to look for. I spent 2 years watching Thomas organize his research, learning how he thought, how he filed information. If Pike's got records about the widow's vein operation, I'll find them faster than anyone else. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Everything we've done has been too dangerous. That didn't stop us before. Elara met his eyes without flinching. This is my fight, Ronan. My brother, my revenge. I'm not sitting in a boarding house while someone else settles my accounts. The argument continued through the afternoon and into the evening, but Elara's will was stone and stone doesn't bend. Eventually, Ronan surrendered to the inevitable, and they began planning in earnest. They acquired clothes appropriate for Pike's party. Elara in a dress that had probably been elegant before it was sold to a second-hand shop. Ronan in a suit that almost fit his frame. Two Wolves refused formal wear, saying he'd be more useful outside watching approaches. Cora took a position across the street from Pike's mansion with a rifle and a clear field of fire, insurance against things going completely wrong. The mansion blazed with light when they arrived the next evening, carriages lined up to discharge wealthy guests who climbed marble steps in their finery. Music drifted from open windows, a string quartet playing something European and complicated. Servants moved through the crowd, carrying champagne on silver trays. Elara and Ronan entered with a group of investors from Denver, blending into the crush of bodies in the entrance hall. No one questioned their presence. In a gathering this large, 2 more faces meant nothing. The mansion was exactly what Elara expected. All marble and mahogany, crystal chandeliers throwing light across oil paintings of landscapes Pike had probably never visited. The guests were the kind of wealthy that came from old money or successful theft, their laughter carefully modulated, their conversations about investments and returns, and the opportunities the West provided for men of vision. Pike's upstairs, Ronan murmured, having spotted their target on the landing. Office is probably nearby. Men like him want their work close. They drifted through the crowd, champagne glasses in hand, though neither drank, watching for opportunities. Guards stood at key positions, 2 by the main entrance, 1 at the base of the stairs, several scattered through the ground floor. Professionals, from the look of them, the kind who got paid to be suspicious. Elara waited until a particularly loud burst of laughter drew attention toward the main salon, then slipped toward the servants' staircase she'd spotted earlier. Ronan followed, moving with surprising grace for a man his size. They climbed to the second floor, emerging into a hallway lined with closed doors. "Which one?" Ronan whispered. "The one with a guard." Elara pointed to a door at the hall's end where a large man stood with his arms crossed. "Pike doesn't guard empty rooms. So we create a distraction." "No, we talk our way past him." Before Ronan could argue, Elara walked straight toward the guard, her expression anxious. "Excuse me, Mr. Pike asked me to fetch some documents from his office. I'm his secretary's assistant. There's been some confusion about investment figures and he needs them immediately." The guard frowned. "Nobody told me about this." "That's because Mr. Pike just decided. You know how he is, everything's urgent, everything's needed 5 minutes ago." Elara let frustration creep into her voice. "Look, you can go down and check with him if you want, but he's in the middle of a conversation with the Denver investors, and you know how he feels about interruptions." The guard hesitated, caught between orders and social dynamics he didn't fully understand. Ronan stepped forward, playing his role. "I'll supervise her. Make sure she just gets the papers and leaves. Fair enough?" After a long moment, the guard stepped aside. 5 minutes, and I'm coming to check." "Of course." The office was everything a rich man's private space should be. Leather chairs, a desk the size of a small boat, bookshelves holding volumes Pike had probably never read. But what Elara cared about was the filing cabinet in the corner and the desk drawers that might hold what they needed. She moved quickly, opening drawers with the lockpicks Ronan had procured. Her hands were steady despite the risk, despite the guard outside counting down their 5 minutes. The first drawer held routine correspondence, the second financial records for legitimate operations. The third was locked more securely, requiring 2 picks and techniques Thomas had taught her years ago. Inside she found gold, not the mineral kind, the documentary kind, letters between Pike and the men he'd hired, shipping manifests for equipment sent to the Superstitions, and most damning, a ledger listing payments made to names Elara recognized: Garrett, Stone, Cross. Next to each name was a notation: Voss elimination, map acquisition, loose end resolution. "That's it," Ronan said, looking over her shoulder. "That's what we need." Elara was gathering the documents when the door opened. Montgomery Pike stood in the doorway, 2 guards flanking him. He was shorter than Elara expected, barely 5.5 feet, with the kind of face that suggested intelligence and cruelty in equal measure. His suit probably cost more than most families earned in a year. His eyes were the flat gray of a shark. "I was wondering when you'd arrive, Miss Voss," Pike said, his voice cultured, almost pleasant. "You're quite predictable. Survivor's guilt drives people to do foolish things, like breaking into my home during a party where 50 witnesses can place you." "These documents," Elara started, "will never leave this room. Guards, take them to the basement, quietly. We wouldn't want to disturb my guests." The guards moved forward, hands on their weapons. Ronan's hand drifted toward his concealed gun, but the math was bad. 2 guards here, more within earshot, guests downstairs who'd hear gunfire. They'd be dead or captured before they reached the front door. "Don't," Pike said, noting Ronan's movement. "I'd rather not kill you here. Blood is so difficult to clean from carpet. But I will if necessary. The story will be that you broke in to rob me and forced my hand. Everyone will believe it because everyone believes me." "Not everyone," Elara said. "The territorial marshal is in my pocket, has been for 3 years. Most of the city's officials are." Pike stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You see, Miss Voss, you've misunderstood the game. This was never about gold or maps or justice. It's about power, and I have it while you don't. Your brother learned that lesson too late. I'd hoped you'd be smarter." "Thomas was smart enough to map something you couldn't find on your own," Elara said, rage overwhelming caution. "Smart enough that you had to kill him to get it. And even then, you failed. The mine's flooded, the gold's unreachable, and you've spent a fortune on expeditions that return nothing but corpses. Something flickered across Pike's face. Anger, maybe, or fear dressed in expensive clothes. The gold is there. It's always there. I'll find it eventually. And when I do, I'll be the richest man west of the Mississippi. Richer than Hearst, richer than Flood, rich enough to buy whatever I want, including silence about what it cost. You're insane. No, I'm determined. There's a difference. Pike gestured to the guards. Take them. Use the back stairs. And make sure the bodies aren't found. I don't want questions about missing guests. The guards moved forward. Then the window exploded inward in a shower of glass. 2 wolves came through rolling, his knife already in hand, taking one guard in the throat before the man could draw his weapon. Ronan lunged at the second guard, grappling for his gun. Pike stumbled backward, reaching for a desk drawer where he probably kept a weapon. But Elara was faster. She grabbed a heavy paperweight and brought it down on his hand with enough force to break bones. Pike screamed. The second guard got his gun up, but Ronan twisted it aside, the shot going wild into the ceiling. Downstairs, the music stopped. Voices raised in alarm. Time to leave, 2 wolves said calmly, wiping his blade on the dead guard's jacket. They ran, out the door, down the hallway, ignoring Pike's shouts for help that echoed through the mansion. Guards were coming up the main stairs, so they took the servants' route, bursting into the kitchen where staff scattered in confusion. Through the service entrance into the garden, over a wall while gunfire erupted behind them, into the street where Cora waited with horses. Go! She shouted, and they went, galloping through San Francisco's night streets with the sound of pursuit fading behind them. They didn't stop until they reached the waterfront, abandoning the horses in an alley and disappearing into the maze of warehouses and shipping offices where 1,000 people could hide and never be found. Elara clutched the documents against her chest, the proof they'd nearly died for, the words that would bring Pike down or get them killed trying. They found shelter in an abandoned warehouse, its cavernous space lit by moonlight through broken windows. Cora built a small fire in a barrel while Ronan kept watch at the door. 2 wolves cleaned his knife with the methodical patience of a man who'd done it 1,000 times. Elara spread the documents on the concrete floor, studying them by firelight. Letters, ledgers, receipts, everything needed to connect Pike to the murders, the conspiracy, the deaths of dozens of people in pursuit of gold he'd never touch. It was all here, the proof Grayson had demanded. Will it be enough? Cora asked. It has to be. But Elara's voice carried doubt. Pike had been right about one thing. He had power, and power protected itself. These documents might bring an investigation, might raise questions, but would they actually put Pike in prison? Would they deliver the justice Thomas deserved? We could just kill him, Ronan said quietly from his position by the door. Walk back to that mansion and put a bullet in his head. Save everyone the trouble of a trial he'll probably buy his way out of. And become murderers? Become what he is? We're already killers. We've got blood on our hands that won't wash off. Ronan's voice was flat, stating facts. One more body won't change what we are. It'll change what we can live with. Elara gathered the documents carefully. We take these to Grayson tomorrow. If he won't act, we take them to newspapers, to federal marshals, to anyone who'll listen. We do this the right way, or we don't do it at all. They slept in shifts, always someone watching, always ready to run. When dawn broke gray and cold over the bay, they moved through a city that didn't yet know what had happened on Nob Hill. The papers would be full of it soon. The break-in, the dead guard, Pike's accusations of attempted theft. But they'd have their story too, and sometimes truth mattered more than who told it first. Marshal Grayson's face when they entered his office carrying Pike's documents was worth the risk they'd taken. He read through the papers slowly, his expression shifting from skepticism to anger to something that might have been shame. Where did you get these? He asked finally. Does it matter? Elara countered. It does if you broke into Pike's mansion and stole them. That makes them inadmissible as evidence. Then don't admit them in court. Use them to know where to look, what questions to ask, who to pressure. Ronan leaned forward. You said you needed proof. There's your proof. What Pike did, who he paid, how many people died on his orders. It's all there. Grayson was quiet for a long time, staring at the documents like they might bite him. Then he said, Pike's already filed a complaint. Says you broke into his home, assaulted him, killed one of his employees. He wants you arrested for burglary and murder. So arrest us. Elara met his eyes. Put us on trial. Make this public. Let a jury see these documents and decide who the real criminal is. That's not how it works. Then make it work. Cora's voice was hard. You're a marshal. You're supposed to enforce the law, not protect rich men who buy their way out of it. Something in Grayson's expression shifted. Pride stung, maybe, or conscience finally overriding convenience. All right. I'll investigate. Quietly, without tipping Pike off. If what's in these documents is real, if I can verify it, I'll bring charges. But you four need to disappear. Leave the city. Leave the territory if you can. Pike's got resources and he'll use them to make sure you never testify. We're not running, Elara said. Then you're fools. But brave fools, at least. Grayson stood, gathering the documents. Give me 2 weeks. If I can build a case, I'll send word. If I can't, he shrugged. Then you should have killed him when you had the chance. They left the marshal's office and returned to the warehouse, waiting while the city ground through its daily business above and around them. 2 weeks felt like forever, and no time at all. They took turns watching the street, reading old newspapers, playing cards with a deck so worn the faces were barely visible. On the 10th day, a boy appeared at the warehouse door carrying a message. Grayson wanted to see them. The marshal's office was different this time, fuller, with federal agents wearing badges that meant something beyond local politics. Documents covered every surface, and in the corner, looking smaller and older than he had at his party, sat Montgomery Pike in handcuffs. Your documents checked out, Grayson said without preamble. We matched the handwriting, verified the payments, interviewed workers who confirmed Pike's involvement. Federal government's taking over. This crosses territorial lines, involves multiple jurisdictions. Pike's looking at decades in prison if he's convicted. Pike's eyes found Elara across the room. You've destroyed me. No, you destroyed yourself. Elara's voice was steady. I just made sure everyone knew about it. The gold is gone. Buried under a mountain you'll never see again. And even if someone eventually digs it out, it won't be you. You'll die in prison, forgotten, just another greedy man who thought he could buy his way past consequences. Pike's face twisted with rage and something that might have been understanding. Your brother, Thomas, he said something similar before Garrett killed him. Said I'd never enjoy what I took because taking it would destroy me. I thought he was being dramatic. His laugh was bitter. Turns out he was right. They left Pike there, a broken man in handcuffs, and walked out into San Francisco sunshine that felt warmer than it had any right to be. The trial would take months, would drag through testimony and evidence and legal arguments that Elara didn't want to participate in, but would because it mattered. Because Thomas deserved to have his story told completely. But that was future work. Present work was simpler. What now? Cora asked as they stood on the street, 4 people who'd survived hell together and were no longer sure how to exist in a world of normal rules and normal consequences. Now we live, Ronan said. Find work, find homes, find whatever comes next that isn't death or gold or revenge. You make it sound easy, 2 wolves observed. It won't be, but we've done harder things. They split up that afternoon, not permanently, but for the time it took to find their feet in a world that had kept spinning while they were underground. Cora found work as a guide for hunting expeditions in the Sierras, leading rich men on adventures that had been carefully scrubbed of real danger. 2 wolves returned to his people for a season, then came back to work as a tracker for the federal marshals who appreciated skills that couldn't be taught. Ronan bought a small ranch in the foothills, raising horses that he gentled with patience instead of breaking with force. It was quiet work, honest work, the kind that let him sleep without dreaming of the people he'd killed or the ones he'd failed to save. And Elara? She took the reward money that came from Pike's conviction, a percentage of his seized assets distributed to the families of those he'd harmed, and started a school in a small town near Redemption Flats. She taught reading and mathematics and geography to children who'd probably never see the places she described. Sometimes she told them stories about mountains and gold and the price of dreams, though she always made sure they understood these were cautionary tales, warnings about the difference between wanting and needing. She never married, never had children. But she lived a life Thomas would have been proud of, useful, purposeful, aimed at making the small corner of the world she occupied slightly better than she'd found it. The years passed the way years do, marking her with gray hair and deepening lines around her eyes. She kept in touch with the others, letters mostly, occasional visits when travel permitted. They'd formed a bond in those mountains that didn't require constant contact to maintain. They'd seen each other at their worst and best, had trusted each other with their lives, and that created a connection that time couldn't erode. 20 years after the events in the Superstitions, a geologist came through town asking questions about the Widow's Vein. Some mining company had studied the old surveys and thought they could reach the deposits from a different angle using new equipment and modern techniques. "Would you guide them?" the geologist asked Elara over coffee in the town's only restaurant. "They're willing to pay well for someone who knows the territory." Elara looked out the window at the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still sharp against the sky, still hiding their secrets in stone and darkness. "No," she said. "Let it lie. Some things are meant to stay buried. But the gold is a curse that's claimed enough lives, including my brother's." She turned back to the geologist, seeing in his eyes the same fever Thomas had carried. "You want my advice? Walk away. Find another dream, another mountain. Because that one takes more than it gives, and it never stops taking until there's nothing left." The geologist left unsatisfied, but he left. Maybe he'd heed the warning, maybe he wouldn't. Either way, it was his choice to make and his consequences to suffer. That evening, Elara climbed the hill behind her house where she'd placed a marker years ago. A simple stone carved with Thomas's name and the dates that bracketed his too short life. She sat beside it as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold that reminded her of the vein they'd found in the cathedral, of the fever that had driven so many to their deaths. "I let it go," she said to the stone, to the memory, to the ghost that sometimes still visited her dreams. The gold, the revenge, the anger that kept me going. I let it all go and found something better, a life that matters for reasons that have nothing to do with metal in the ground. The wind whispered through the scrub grass, carrying the scent of sage and distance. No answer came because stones don't speak and the dead don't return. But Elara felt something release in her chest, some final weight she'd been carrying since that day in Redemption Flats when 3 riders had come hunting her. She walked back down the hill as stars emerged, the mountain's dark silhouettes against a sky going purple and deep blue. Somewhere up there, the Widow's Vein waited with its gold and its ghosts. Maybe someone would find it someday. Maybe the mountain would claim a few more dreamers before humanity finally learned the lesson. But that was their story now. Hers was finished. Elara Voss had entered those mountains carrying a map and a brother's dream. She'd left carrying something more valuable, the understanding that survival wasn't the same as living, that revenge wasn't the same as justice, and that some treasures cost more than their worth. She'd learned that the hard way, in darkness and flood and the company of people who'd become family through shared suffering. She'd lost Thomas but found Ronan, Cora, 2 wolves, found herself maybe stripped down to essentials by a mountain that tested everyone who entered and found most wanting. The gold remained where it had always been, locked in stone, waiting for the next desperate fool to come seeking easy answers to hard questions. It would wait forever if necessary. Gold was patient. Gold didn't care who lived or died reaching for it. But Elara cared. She'd cared enough to let it go, to choose life over legend, to build something real instead of chasing something that glittered and destroyed in equal measure. And in the end, that choice, more than any gold, more than any revenge, was what Thomas's death had taught her. Not that dreams were worthless, but that the best dreams were the ones you could hold without them burning your hands, the ones that made you larger instead of smaller, the ones that added to the world instead of taking from it. She'd found her dream in a schoolhouse full of children who'd never know what she'd survived to teach them. She'd found it in letters from friends who'd walked through hell with her and emerged changed but whole. She'd found it in mornings that started with coffee instead of fear, in nights that ended with sleep instead of nightmares. The Widow's Vein had claimed its victims and would claim more. But Elara Voss wasn't one of them. She'd survived. She'd escaped. And she'd built a life in the aftermath that was worth more than all the gold those mountains could hold. That was her treasure. That was her victory. And it was enough.